What?
She was so close to be ready.
Hey, I don't know. I didn't put these on there. Is this yours?
No. It's calibrating. It's directly.
God only knows how many years old this is.
I threw all the.
I dare you to
that was
try.
in mine out.
Right. Calling to order the City of Kewaunee Committee of the Whole, Monday, June 27th. Roll call, please.
Eric Woznicki,
Here.
Kathy Brown. Here. John Blaha.
Yep.
James Brewster. Absent. Wendy Shelton. Here. Janita Zimmerman. Absent. Robin Nelson. Here. Richard Taylor.
Here.
And then, of course, Mayor
Here.
Jeff Wolfenweider.
Item two, approval of Committee of the Whole minutes, May 23rd, 2022.
Motion to approve those minutes for May 23rd, 2022.
We have a motion from Robin. Would anybody like to second that?
I'll second.
So Kathy to second it.
I got Wendy. Whichever.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You're done with that. Oh. My brother has all the fun. At this time, I'm opening the floor up to public comment. If anyone would like to talk, please limit your time to 3 minutes. State your name and your address and feel free to come up to the podium and address the council. A second chance for anybody for the opportunity for public comments. And find one more chance here for public comment. It's closed. Moving on to item number 4 in the agenda, unfinished business. There is none, right?
No,
There is none. No unfinished business. Moving on to number 5 of the agenda. Steve asked us to move number 8, the Harbor Marine Toilet that's going on July 12th and 13th up to this point, because we have someone that wants to chime in on this.
Yeah, Brendan is here and Augie, they may have some comments to make. Basically, the charrette, we've gotten a list of the stakeholders and we've submitted that to Cedar Corporation. Cedar Corporation is going to be letting everyone know about the charrette and the dynamics of the charrette. In essence, the harbor plan this is an opportunity for public input as it relates to, I believe there's about 17 projects that have been listed in the Harbor Marina plan initially for review and possible inclusion in the final plan document. And so with that, we anticipate it'll be a 2-day event with meetings here and then also tours in the field to take a look at the various aspects of the Harbor Marina infrastructure improvement or rehabilitation opportunities that we might have with the harbor and the marina. So with that, Brendan or Augie, if you've got anything else you'd like to add, by all means.
I just got feedback from Jeff Dorak.
Augie, if you wouldn't mind, would you come up, please, just so the people on the YouTube world can hear you? Thank you. And hopefully that's working.
Yeah.
I just got feedback from Jeff Dorak. It'd be $50 an hour for the bus. I didn't get a chance to get it on the agenda. He just got back to me on Friday, so I didn't get a chance to get back onto the agenda. So I'm not sure if that's something that we need to get it out there for, to put it on the agenda for to pass or anything. So for the shred through. So, okay. So that's another thing that's gonna be coming. So I don't know exactly if we're gonna need it or not. It just depends on how many people are gonna reply back. So it's gonna be kind of iffy. We're gonna have to play that on the line too. So
When you say $50, is that for the
for the bus, yes, for the bus from Dorak's bus service.
that's a
So,
very nominal fee?
yeah,
For the whole event?
yes,
Hour.
for an hour per hour, yeah. And that's probably like a half a day. So, and again, it depends on how many people. So
I mean, is there an agenda, like what you're gonna be doing at a specific time, those 2 days, that people can
I think Eric Fuller has that, and I don't think it's kind of ready out to present yet, but I think he's working on it. I think he's pretty much got it in detail, but I'm not sure if he's got that ready. I don't, Brandon, does Eric got that kind of the agenda?
I thought it was, yeah, skeleton.
He's got it somewhat done, but I don't think he's got it ready to release.
Yeah, I have a copy of it too, and I can leave this with you guys if you'd like to make more copies. Eric Fowle, one of our planners, had sent out basically this invitation. I believe everybody here got this to all council members, stakeholders, or people that were kind of chosen to be on the list for that. One thing just to note on is we haven't really gotten a whole lot of response yet. So if you get a chance to talk to people about this beyond basically Cedar employees, Edgewater employees, LNRP and Water 360, there's only like 5 people that have replied at all. So right now attendance is looking low. So see if you can stir some people up and get them here. The more input we have, the better that the overall, product is going to be. We want public input and everything on this, of course. So-
Brandon, are they gonna have then a better scope of what's going on those 2 days for the general public that's gonna excite them to wanna come? Otherwise it's just gonna be some boring presentation. People just aren't gonna be excited.
Well, kind of on the schedule, I mean, it talks about, what's going to be done or what part of it there is, but, as far as a marketing piece beyond, I guess, the invitation that you guys received, we haven't really put anything else together. So that's something we can look at, I mean, if you need or want to. Otherwise, I don't know if it helps, you guys talk to anybody that's on the list or stuff like that to try and get more.
I have a question. Is this something we could put on the website for Keep the City Kewaunee and maybe put it out on some social networking? But it's taking place in the newspaper.
Well, I know originally it was kind of a hand-picked list, not to get too many people. It was more council members or, people that are invested in it, plan commission, park and rec members and different things like that as well, along with some members of the community too.
So where is the list? Is there, do we have access to that list so we can look at them and maybe talk to the people who are on that list?
Do you have a copy of that list? I know, Augie, I think we'd work with you guys. Otherwise, I can send over a list of who was invited. We got a spreadsheet that we're tracking, who all it went to and all of that stuff. I can forward
And
that to
then,
you guys as well.
maybe we can talk to them and say,
I had talked to a few people from the Blue Door tournament and I had asked them if they had an invite and they had said, no, they have not gotten an invite. So I'm not sure. And they had checked their junk mail and spam and they did not receive anything in there, either one. So they might want to check to see if they got the correct spelling or if it went in came back to them as not.
Yeah, I'll check our list and send it over to staff as to who it went to and stuff, and we can kind of go from there. But if there's other people that need to be added or different things like that, we want to make sure we get that out just so we do get good input from the public on this.
Did all the council, did you guys all get an invite?
I did, I
Yes.
responded.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure that everybody, some people are getting it anyway, so. Okay,
I basically responded, I can only make it to Tuesday, and Eric said that that would be fine. At least making one day.
If people can make it for, the full 2 days or whatever, great, but if people can only pop in for certain pieces of it, that's definitely better than nothing. Yeah, I'll get that list put together and send that over, so you guys know who all was, I guess, officially invited.
Well, then we can at least talk to them and say,
Yeah.
we'd like to see you there, or.
Any other questions regarding this matter?
I'll get kind of the updated list, Steve. Okay, we'll all went to, and then I can send it on.
We'll move on then to item 5A.
Moving on to the agenda, item 5A now.
Yeah.
Bauman and Associates update on the work efforts.
He's online, yeah, because he has,
Is he logged in?
yep, he is logged in. Are you there, Justin?
Justin is.
I'm here, but I think Bauman's going first.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Justin
Bauman.
That's right, Steve, so
Sorry, Justin.
No problem.
go back to sleep. We'll ring him a bit.
It's
Be sure with Brandon to copy that. Cycle. Oh,
No, we're on Bowman.
We had a request as it relates to where we are with Bowman and Associates relative to their assistance in the clerk treasurer's office. During our transition that we've had relative to our clerk treasurer. Our transition to our part-time clerk typist and to some additional things going on in the clerk's office, of course. In essence, we've talked to Bauman and Associates. Thank you, sir. And in essence, they provided financial services to the city of Kewaunee for the months of March, April, May, June, and now for July. We anticipate the monthly services agreement is going to terminate at the end of July. This transition has been more cumbersome than we would have liked. Banyan is kind of interesting as a software. It's kind of old, archaic. And with that, some of the things that we did in the past were somewhat redundant and duplicative. The new software, workhorse, and the modifications to the way we do things, in addition to filling the part-time clerk typist position, should improve our efficiencies as we go forward. In the month of July, Ballman would assist in the last financial statement generation and help in payroll as well. We do have another employee who's going to be out, and with that, we may have assistance from that employee, but we may not, depending on the situation and how things develop. So with that, if we needed Ballman in July for payroll, we would probably do that as well. They've indicated they would stick to their fee and take on this additional work if we needed them to do that. And at any time in the future, if we have needs or whatever, they would assist us and charge $100 an hour for that work effort. But if we did have that happen, we would alert the city council to let you know what's going on and gain your concurrence. So that's kind of where it's at. This has taken a little bit longer than what we anticipated. And but we have been in turmoil, to say the least. So
If I may, what were the particular struggles?
I guess perhaps Joanne, you might be able to add a little bit more to that.
Well, it's just, Karen, being the only one in the office, did the best that she could, getting everybody through and stuff like that. Then when I came in, trying to continue doing her roles and then trying to train me and then some of the problems are with the Banyan system is that like doing your reconciliation and like with the marina and how everything is done. I mean, there's just multi-facets to accomplishing your end goal, so we're taking deposits in and we're not putting them into the Banyan system like right away. We'll receipt them in, we'll kind of let them sit, we'll take them to the bank. But then at the end of the month, then we're trying to recreate and putting them into Banyan, which to me doesn't make sense. Because it's, then you're trying to remember what you did. So that's part of the problem. So when I went to help with the month end of May, trying to go back and figure out all these deposits. And so where I've come from is that anytime you do a deposit, that should be in your software system, so you can match verbatim at the end of the day. Yeah, when you're reconciling, they don't do that. They take like all the marina deposits and they make it like one pile. And then you have to look at your bank reconciliation and figure out what that pile is. To me, that's not accounting.
Okay.
So, we're trying to, it's a jigsaw puzzle is what it is. And so for me going forward, that I can't work that way. So things are going to have to change.
And it looks like we have something on the agenda to help you out with that.
Yes.
So were the numbers generally, were there issues with the numbers or was that not an issue?
Well, the trouble with the numbers is that, you're taking a pot and you're trying to, figure out how that all balances.
Sure.
So sometimes that, makes it's tough. And then you're kind of like, well, I'm off this much. So then, it takes you a little longer. and then you finally find it, and then, then you're balancing out. It's, so it's just,
The end of the month with the bank reconciliations were the biggest issue that I saw there. And in essence, there's times when we have some entities coming in to bring in dollars. And they're literally, there's a pile of dollars here for donations and a pile of dollars here for admissions. And they're all crinkled up and
All mixed up and.
so
okay.
it's, Joanne's, she'll figure it out, and she'll make, you're gonna have to figure it out, right? Otherwise you're gonna go nuts. But, progress will be made, workhorse, and we get everyone, we have Maria, our part-time started today, and she's a sharp lady. Karen and Joanne, I've got a lot of faith in these guys, and they're gonna shine.
And so you're anticipating when Workforce is up and running, it'll be much simpler for you.
it will be, yes. And we just have to change some of our practices.
With that being said, with that being said, is there going to be a rollout and a process where you have to convert a lot of the data that's from that, or is that data somehow going to be transferred in there, or is that a manual entry to get that rolled in there?
It's gonna, well, it'll be a manual entry, okay, but it's not, we're not gonna convert all the data from Banyan into Workhorse.
It's gonna cut it off.
We're gonna stop using it, and we're gonna roll over our beginning balances. And then we'll always have access to Banyan because it's on our system. So if we ever have to look at archives, we'll be able to go back into it. But with Workhorse, we're gonna just start, what our beginning balances are for January 1st. That's what we're gonna use, and we're gonna go forward.
So Joanne, how hard would it be for Baker Tilly to really do an audit on a system like Banyan? Would it be almost impossible for them to do this?
You could ask Justin that when we get to that part
I
of it.
mean, if it's really hard for you to understand it and you're very experienced, how is somebody coming in from the outside gonna have an easier time of figuring out what happened?
I mean, they've been doing it for years, so I mean, I'm sure that they've kind of figured out Banyan, and what they need to get out of it. They're doing different processes than I'm doing. So, you can answer that question with Justin when he's.
Okay.
And so you're going to, so everything from January 1st, 2022 is going to be in Workhorse.
No. January
2023. Okay, so you're not going to back, okay,
No.
so you're gonna get all the new numbers. So when are you gonna actually start using Workhorse?
January 1st.
Okay,
So
so
we'll
we
be,
have to,
we'll be entering in stuff like
Okay.
vendors and, because we're using utility. So we're gonna, probably the fourth quarter of 2022, we'll be entering in all that
Okay.
information and stuff, but then come January 1st, we're going to,
new system.
Yep.
And would you anticipate that going forward pretty soon, we'll get regular financial statements and stuff in the packets?
yes, as long as the bank, so the bank statements, okay, and I kind of talked with you about this when you were in our office the other day. Our bank statements come in, shortly after the 1st. They're not always like right there as of the 1st. And the way you guys hold your meetings, is the second Monday. So sometimes, it's too close to when your meeting is held. So when I get those bank statements, and then being able to, get those all balanced out. To be able to create those financial reports. I mean, I will do my best to be able to do that, but sometimes that timing is a
So
little
probably be a
tough.
month behind all these.
Yeah, and that's not unusual.
That's fine, but we're a little bit more than that right now. So,
Well, you're getting May coming into, you'll get May going into, you may get May and June at the July meeting. But you should only be 1 month.
Okay,
behind.
great, that's kind of what I was getting at.
I guess what I'm understanding though is when you start changing some of these processes of reconciling on a daily basis and doing some of the things that you're saying, your reconciliation of month into your bank statement should be pretty seamless at that point. too,
Yeah,
right,
it shouldn't
going
take me a
forward.
week to do one bank
Right,
account.
so
I mean,
sounds like you have a plan.
I've worked in other, municipalities where I've had, 10 different accounts. And it takes you, maybe a half a day to do all of those. Yeah. That checking account took me a week to reconcile. And I mean, that's just, not how it should be done. It really shouldn't.
I have a question. So this procedure, how we were doing it, we're just throwing the money on a pile to the end of the month. Was that that's not a banning thing. That was just someone made a call thing. That's how we're doing it.
Yeah, for me, I'm thinking yes, not being here and how they were, how things were being done before. I'm not trying to,
No.
point a finger at anybody, but, that's not how you should be doing it. And if Karen did, because that's the way Karen had to do it to get by, then that's just the way it was.
And I think some things, just like what Rich was saying, what the auditors are doing, they're working with the numbers that you've already painstakingly reconciled,
Yes.
correlated, and put in as the data entry sort of things, and figured out where they go
Correct.
and how much and all of that. And so that's a whole different function. And going forward, I think it's not only going to be the software that we're looking at that's going to help you in that, it's also going to be some in-house procedural changes that are going to be taking effect as well. So
Yes.
there are some positive changes to
Yeah,
to
that's
come.
what I
So.
think. Sounds very positive.
Robin?
I would just like to say thank you so much and keep hanging in there. We really appreciate the work effort
For
that
sure.
you're doing.
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Yes, we do.
Thanks. I'll try.
That's all you can do.
Is there any roll call needed or any motion on the bone?
That was just an update. If there are any further questions, then you can move on to item B.
So if everyone's ready, I'd like to move on to the presentation by Baker Tilly on the City of Kewaunee 2021 audit report.
Well, good evening, everyone. First, thank you for allowing me to present remotely this year. I'm currently a little under the weather, if you can't tell by my voice, so I'm assuming you wouldn't want me standing next to you right now at that podium. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Justin Hoagland. I'm a senior manager with Baker Tilly, and I'm one of the individuals who performs a financial audit for the city. Before I forget, please just stop me at any point with questions. But we did issue the 2021 audit reports last Wednesday, and I just wanted to briefly go over these reports, and then I'll dive deeper into more of the financial highlights for the year. So the first document that I wanted to discuss is the financial statements themselves, and specifically our auditor's opinion, which starts on Roman numeral 1 of the financial statements. And so the city has received the same opinion as in the last couple of years, which is a clean or unmodified opinion on a portion of the financial statements. But then we do issue a qualified opinion on a portion of the financial statements as well. And that's because the city has not calculated the city's liability for other post-employment benefits. So for those of you new to the council, this relates to a couple of years ago when the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which is the standard setting body that we as auditors need to follow, issued, it's called statement number 75 related to other post-employment benefits. And the city is part of the state health insurance plan. And so when this standard came out, it was the city's decision to not pay to have an actuarial study done to determine what that liability is. And so we've issued this qualified opinion ever since because we have no way of knowing what the actual liability is without the study being done. So I just wanted to mention this. Again, it's similar to last year, prior years, but this qualified opinion can be removed in the future if the city elects to have this study done. And most cases for other clients, the liability even ended up being immaterial, so we wouldn't even need to record anything related to that.
Excuse me, Justin, would you recommend that that Kewaunee does that?
I will say, I believe Kewaunee is my only client who decided not to do it. From my prior experience, the study cost somewhere around $4,000 on average. And for most of our clients, it was so immaterial that we haven't had them do a new study in the last 3 or 4 years. So definitely something to consider and something we can discuss more of. But obviously totally up to the, the council if you feel like that's value added, spending that money. The main question would be probably to your, municipal advisor. I forgot if you use, is it Baird or Ellers for your debt issuances? Baird, yeah, if, asking them like, does that impact what rates you get at all? Having a qualified opinion. Normally, I can't speak to it myself, but normally it wouldn't, because a qualified opinion is not as bad as like an adverse opinion or something like that. But it might to them just to make sure it's not impacting any sort of rates that you would get on any new debt. But good question. The next document that I wanted to go over is the reporting and insights from the 2021 audit, which I believe you all have in front of you. I encourage everyone on the council to read this, but this document contains a bunch of different information, such as, what our responsibilities are as your auditors, any internal control issues that we found, recommendations, material audit entries that we made as part of the audit, some high-level financial results, and some other required communications to those charged with governance. So next I wanted to go through the financial highlights document.
So I'm sorry, Justin, this is Wendy Shelton. I have another question. Are we gonna go back through these, or? Because I have some questions in each of these categories.
Yeah, we can either do that right now, or
I don't want
we
to mess up
can-
your flow, but I do have questions that I want to answer.
whatever works best for you. I'm fine if you want to just fire them off now, or you can just wait till the end. Either way is good with me.
Okay, if it's okay, then I'll ask my questions in each section.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess the first thing I wanted to ask is, we've had a lot of changeover in staff, and I know that you came into City Hall, and I guess I was in February, and I was wondering specifically who were the sources of information for this 2021 audit?
Like, who do we mostly work with?
Who did you work with to get your information? Yes.
It'd be mostly Terry, Karen. Yep, Karen. Steve was obviously there, but it'd be mostly, I would say mostly Terry was our main point of contact. So it was really beneficial having her. I think she came back temporarily
She
to
did come
help.
back.
Otherwise, honestly, we would have been like, she had answers that we wouldn't have been able to figure out without all extensive digging. So it was great to have her, back for those couple of days while we were there.
And you did you talk to any banks or anything like that?
So we confirm all of your cash. So we send out confirmations to banks as part of our normal audit procedures. And so they confirm exactly how much cash do you have as of 12/31/2021. So we do obtain third-party information and confirmation like that.
Okay, so it's mostly Terry, Karen, Steve, you confirmed with the banks, and that's where the information came from.
Yeah. The only other thing I can think of as far as like third-party information would be, you have ambulance billing, correct? That we would obtain kind of the aging reports for that ambulance billing directly from the ambulance company, kind of showing what's receivable at year end. But yeah, everything else would just come from the system or Terry and Karen, like I said.
Okay,
We had a number of meetings with Justin, and we went over things. We had questions. He had questions. We came to resolve on most of the items, if not all the items. In that sense, it was a learning experience for me. For Joanne and Karen. Terry had done the vast majority over the last number of years, being the clerk treasurer. She's one who has the numbers at her fingertips and works with them on a daily basis and on a monthly basis. And so with that, we went over certain things to validate numbers and to validate some of our thoughts as it relates to available funds. That's it, Justin.
Yeah. Yep. The only thing I'll just add, as I'm thinking here, if you want to know more about kind of what third-party type information we look at, obviously we're looking at invoices, we're looking at receipts. all of your debt information we tie out to support provided by Baird. Especially this year, it was a lot of information with the refundings that happened. So all that kind of support comes from your official statement issued by Baird when you issued those refunding debts.
And the refunding debts are what are the refunding debts?
I believe you had 2 debt refundings. So you essentially took out new debt to pay off old debt because the new debt was at a lower interest rate. And those were split between like the city, the utilities. It was probably one of the bigger tasks that we had this year was recording all of the various aspects of our refunding for those 2 issuances.
Okay. I have a question on page 7 of Insights. At the very bottom, these were new things that were not on last year's audit report. And it's the last 2 little tags and controls over monthly and year-end accounting. It says bank reconciliations were not performed accurately at year-end for all accounts. Can you please explain that?
Yep. So during our audit process, we were having issues tying cash out to to the confirmations from the bank, as well as reconciliations that were performed. And so this is one of the things where Terry, we really needed Terry's help, because I get Joanne's frustration, because we had to kind of do this at the end of December, was try to reconcile some of these accounts. So the bank reconciliations most of them were fine, but there were some that were not completed either timely or they were not accurately done for December. And so as part of the audit process, we had to go and figure out, well, what should the numbers really be? And so that's why that point was added this year. Normally you wouldn't have had that point as far as bank reconciliations. As far as adjusting journal entries, so previously, if my memory serves me right, is, normally Terry would make journal entries and then Fred would sign off on any journal entries that were made. We as auditors always want to see that there's an approval being done and a review of any journal entries being made. And so I think with Fred's departure, not all the journal entries were reviewed. And so that's why we had to add that point this year as well.
And then below that, you recommend that a designated employee review the segregation of duties, risks, and these potential controls. Does this have to be an employee, or we're supposed to have a finance committee up and going? Could the members of finance committee serve in that role?
They could. Normally it's like an administrator or a finance director that would be reviewing the journal entries.
Or when we get a new, the permanent administrator.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be more common than having the finance committee would usually, a lot of places they would get sent any journal entries so they could at least see them. But normally we'd more rely on, again, the finance director or an administrator reviewing entries that were then made by, whether it's the clerk, treasurer, or someone like that.
Okay. On page 8, in the same thing, it says the fund balance in the general fund balance went up to 417,578. And I think we had a deficit last year.
Correct.
Like negative 50,000. So where did all this extra money come from, would you say?
No, that's a great question. I was going to hit on that during the financial highlights. So I would say there's 3 main drivers of this. Number one would be that, so the city, you redid the city roof, right? The city hall roof in 2020, that's when the expenditure happened, but you didn't actually take out the debt for that until 2021. And so the debt shows up as revenue when you get it. And so it showed up as revenue in 2021. And so there's kind of like a timing issue between when the expenditure happened and when the debt was received. So it showed up as essentially it was like, I think a little bit over 100,000 of that net income relates to this kind of timing of when the expenditures and debt happened with the roof. So that was one portion of it. The next big piece was mainly related to, there were some vacant positions during the year. So salaries and wages were below budget by a decent amount. And then, I would say the third large chunk was there was a transfer made from the Marquette School Fund to the general fund for, I think it was a little bit over 100,000 again, to kind of to reimburse the general fund for wages per the grant agreement. So that money was transferred over after that kind of grant was closed out to reimburse the general fund for that. So again, these are all kind of like one-time type deals. So it's great to have this huge net income in 2021, but it's not something that's, I would say, sustainable. Because again, one-off type situations that all just happen in the same year.
Okay, and then there is the assigned fund balance. At the bottom of the page, you mentioned that there's specific things, boat launch repair, youth center. Canine fund and equipment, are these funds available? Because they were not available last year. Are these for these earmarkings, are they available this year?
Yes, saying, so I know I had to find out what page number it is.
That's eight.
There's, yeah, on the financials, we have a breakdown of exactly how much is assigned for each one of these categories. Let me. So page 39 of the financials kind of breaks down what their what the amounts are that are being assigned. And so likely because you had a negative fund balance in total in prior years, we can't show amounts being assigned. So that's probably why this is the first year that you're seeing these assigned amounts. So these are the assigned amounts are amounts that the city has said, hey, we're going to spend this money that we got on these specific things. But you can always unassign those funds if you elect to do so.
And then I'm my last question on this section is the water utility and I'm gonna guess you're gonna talk about that at some point.
Yep. I'll go through the
Okay.
water and sewer utilities as far as like a high level operating results.
Yeah, Justin, this is Rich Taylor. So taking in the aggregate, all of these material weaknesses you find in our accounting practices, would you feel like in the aggregate that they would meet a threshold to perhaps get a forensic audit going back a few years?
I would say no. Most of the internal control type deficiencies that we have or that we listed out here on page 7, that Wendy was talking about, a lot of them are segregation of duties issues, where there's just not enough people at the city to properly segregate all of the duties. And a lot of these points are very common for other municipalities your size in Wisconsin. As Wendy brought up, some of the more concerning ones are, well, if bank recs aren't being done, okay, that's an issue. You really should have adjusting journal entries being, reviewed and approved. But again, a lot of the other ones aren't as concerning because are to the point that they're common in other municipalities your size. I have no reason to ever suggest that you get a forensic audit done because we have never seen anything. Because for a forensic audit, you're more looking for like fraud or something for that is my understanding of a forensic audit. We haven't come across anything that would make us recommend that. We would, if we ever saw anything, we would definitely recommend that to you
So
immediately.
you've had no trouble tracking the inflows and outflows of money in the city of Kewaunee since 2017?
We've been the auditors since prior to 17, but I mean, do we do a lot of journal entries and everything? Yes, throughout the audit. Did we ever come to anything that's been concerning to us as far as misappropriation of assets and stuff like that? No. So, again, to the best of my knowledge, we always get the numbers where they should be at year end. It just takes a little wiggle room to get there.
Thank you.
And so these
John had-
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Justin, John Blah. On page 9, something that stuck out to me was the water, that paragraph where it says water loss.
Yep.
City had a significant amount of water loss in 17 to 21. That water loss equated to a range of 45% to 24%. To me, that seems like an awful lot. I mean, if we're at the
Yeah.
45% range of water loss, that's almost, we pump 10 gallons and lose 4 gallons of it, or 4.5 gallons of it.
Yep. Yep. Nope. That's a great point, John.
I mean,
And
that's,
it-
to me, that sounded, I mean, if it was 10%, I would have thought it was a lot. But 45 to 24%, and it's been for the past 17, 18, 19, so it's been for the past 5 years.
yep. Yeah, for sure.
That's a
And
lot.
There aren't that many swimming pools in Kewaunee.
Well, that's a lot of water loss. 45% is a lot.
Where's
That's,
it going?
Well,
And that water's not lost, that water.
yes, this is water that's being pumped, but not coming back through the sewage treatment, right?
yes, and it's not being.
So it's considered loss.
Correct, and it's not being accounted for. I mean, we're not charging for that water loss. Yet we have to charge more because we're pumping more water, but so that inevitably goes on the customers, affects the customers' rates, correct? I mean, we're using more electricity to pump the water.
It's
going through the meter.
It's common for municipalities to be somewhere between 10 and 20%. However, older, more mature communities like Kewaunee, where you have an aging infrastructure, you run into these things. I think.
45?
Well, that's extreme. There's no question about that.
Well, it says it right here. It says 45 to 24. So
Well, but we've made improvements. I don't know, Tony, do you have anything?
yeah, come on. Tony. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying that when I read this, I'm like, holy cow, that's a lot of water.
And
loss.
just Tony, if you could clarify that this water loss is not metered, this is not billed water.
So yes, you're 100% right. So you're every 10 gallons, you're losing 4.5. You're 100% correct when you say that. Part of that was, obviously a big part of it was leaking. Well, fixed leaks here, fixed leaks there. Luckily, when Brian came aboard, he was very aggressive and helped me out. We got that down to 18 this last year. So in the course of 2 to 3 years, it went from 46 to 18%. So we're kind of back where we need to be. But I also spent a lot of money fixing stuff that could have been done years ago.
Yeah.
So that's where it's.
Yeah, no, I'm not blaming anybody, Tony.
No,
It's just when I read
it
it.
is partially my fault because at the same time, when I was first started off, it was really high. I gotta learn my ins and outs of what I'm doing in the first place, let alone figure out what the hell's wrong and where the problem spots are. Now I got the problem spots figured out. That's my first spot to go look when I have problems, so. But yes, you're 100% correct. That's a lot of water, but it's actually in a small town like this, so too, the water we pump, they probably lose Green Bay more than that in a day's time of when we pump in a month, so. It goes in hand in hand.
Not blaming anybody.
No, it's fine. I just
And
saying.
we gotta give you the
Thank you.
tools to keep fixing.
Correct. And money, yep, exactly.
Thank you, Tony.
Janita, you had a question?
Yeah, just real quick, Justin, Janita Zimmerman. The youth center, is that supposed to be the community center? It's
That,
on page 8.
yeah, that I can't confirm. That would be information that we would have gotten from Terry, kind of saying, here's the categories
Yeah.
and
Okay.
the amounts. So we just use based off what she provided then.
Okay, I didn't know if that was a typo or not, so I was just curious, so
Is this youth center supposed to be in our budget?
I'm thinking
I don't
not.
recall seeing it in the budget.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Sean. I'm good.
Go on, Justin.
Wendy, were there any other questions on the reporting and insights? All really good discussions, and why we put points like these in this document.
Okay, I guess I have a question about the management letter. On the page before the signatures. Number 45 is added in 2021. It says, I'm just confused. Who wrote this letter?
So essentially we put this letter together and then we have, again, normally it would be like the administrator and the clerk sign it. I think I think Jeff signed it as well as we would have the mayor sign it. So we put it together, but then it's pretty much the city attesting certain things to us. And so, yeah, that last point, number 45, is new this year. There was a new, I would say it's nothing to be concerned about or anything. There was a new standard that was out there related to an annual report. And so we had to put this attestation in there that you do not prepare an annual report. Essentially, an annual report would be something that you include our financial statements in some other report that you do. And, I don't know if you just do a summary of something to the community or of the financials or something like that, and you include our auditor's report in that. We then technically would need to make sure that that annual report is actually accurate because you're including our audited financial statements within it. And so we're just making sure again that you do not prepare an annual report like that, because if you did, we would have to review it to make sure it was materially correct.
Justin,
Almost-
what you're saying is we could put something like that out there that would be incomplete or some omissions were made. That would make it
Exactly,
inaccurate.
Jeff.
Okay.
Yep, that is exactly right. So that's what I haven't, it's very rare to have an annual, I guess, report that would meet the new standards.
Okay. And then number 42, there's a number 42 in last year's audit report that says, we understand the general fund's negative fund balance position and the need for the city to borrow from its agency fund at the end of the year and have developed a plan to address and correct the situation. Can you give me a follow-up on that?
Yep, so you're saying that was in last year's management?
That was in
letter?
last year's, and it's not in this year's, and so I'm just
Yeah,
wondering, has that been resolved?
Yes, it has been. So that was, that's rare for us to include a point like that. But because of, normally there is this deficit cash in multiple funds that again, you have to borrow money from your tax fund just to make them whole at year end. And so we felt it was a big enough point that we wanted to put it in there so that you would know like, well, this exists. We know it exists and we have a plan in place to try to correct it, which you did with that huge net income in the general fund in 2021. So that's why we removed that point, because there wasn't this advance happening of deficit cash.
Okay, so if we don't have that big influx of money next year,
Well,
is this going to be an issue? Is this going to be an issue in the coming year?
likely not, unless you go and I would say and spend all of that you just gained. It's not like you're going to drop right back down to where you were, as long as you keep up the same kind of practices that you've been doing the last 5+ years, you've been steadily increasing. You'd have to do a pretty big drop to get back to that negative cash position.
So Justin, Rich Taylor here again. So are you saying that the big influx of cash that we got that helped put us in a positive position was the $400,000 plus loan that we took out? Is that what was going to the positive side of the ledger?
It's the roof, the Marquette transfer and vacancies.
And we took on debt for the roof though, right?
In 2020, but issued in 2021.
But the bottom line is.
The roof was a portion of it, but about 100,000 of the 400,000.
The roof is also in a loan that's going to come.
Yeah, that's in a loan. The bottom line is there's no panacea that all of a sudden we have $400,000. You have to be careful of how you
Yes,
utilize
it's
those
not-
dollars. Because it's a one-time shot. The money tree, you picked the leaves and the tree is down now. There's no more leaves. So you better try to be careful on how you utilize those dollars as we go forward. Same thing with the ARC dollars. I mean, those are one-time shots. And it's great that we got those dollars. It helps us out financially from a number of different perspectives, but it's not a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. The rainbow's no longer there.
Yes,
It's been, this is Jeff again. So just another thing for clarity here, there was some refinancing done, some long-term debt taken on. And obviously those loans, will decrease some of the monthly obligations that we have in payments. How much has that in itself helped the general fund balance?
it would have essentially zero impact to that general fund net income for the year.
But going forward, if we're looking at cash flow, that would have to give us more cash flow if we've
Oh.
extended that debt limit, that term.
So for sure, in the future, you're gonna overall you're paying less in interest because you refinance that debt. I was just speaking more to 2021 in particular, wouldn't have necessarily had that much impact. But yeah, you will be, there is a net present value kind of calculated when you do these refundings. Which would be in our footnotes as well, kind of showing here's how much money you're saving over time by refunding the debt. So yes, it will have an impact over
It's kind of a
time.
specific question that you maybe you're not able to answer at this time, but I'd just be curious to know going forward with the financing plan that we were on prior to refinancing that debt, that long-term debt, what kind of savings we'll recognize annually based on taking and now extending that out to a 30-year deal. And we got lower interest rates and longer term debt, so lesser monthly payments. So that should free up cash flow each given year versus what we were at before.
Correct. And I believe that Barry would have included that type of analysis in the, the closing documents of the debt. If you look on, like page, I think it's 36 of the financials, we kind of go over some of that refunding debt. And so, it's more complicated one. Some of the refunding debt was related to utilities. Some of it was the city. But we show that, the cash flow. So under like the current refunding, if you're on page 36 of the financials, under the current refunding heading, second paragraph, we say, the current refunding resulted in an economic gain of $160,234. So that's kind of your, again, in the cash flow savings over time, through 2039. And then the other debt issuance, the refunding, the last paragraph under the current refunding, you save 31,000 about, again, through 2035.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Wendy?
And please forgive me, I'm going back to the material corrected misstatements.
Okay.
If you could just explain, I look at this and I'm like, boy, there is millions of dollars worth of misstatements that have been corrected. Can you just explain what that means? Why I shouldn't be worried about this? This is page 27.
Yeah, let me go to that page here. So you are absolutely correct when that we do millions of dollars worth of entries. We have, I don't know, we must have had 40 to 50 entries, audit entries that we did as part of the audit. But a lot of them are recurring entries that we just do for the city every year. And so, whether it's Terry or Karen, know that we just do those entries as part of the audit every year. So like a couple first ones are related to your tax roll and preparing your tax entry, where again, it's just kind of knowing like, well, Baker Tilly will come in and make these entries at the end of the year. And so that's what those are. Again, we just entries we make every year. The debt was a big one with the refunding. Again, a lot of these are not just one-off new entries that we found this year. Some of them are, but a lot of them are recurring that we would have most years.
But much larger this year generally. So
For sure, like
okay.
the debt one was much larger, yeah, because of the refundings. But yeah, some recurring, some new ones, but there are a lot of entries that we do make.
Okay, so so I guess you don't seem to be concerned about this and you're the auditor, but explain to me why I should not be worried about this.
Because you said so.
Yeah, you can't trust the auditor. So would I be concerned if I was in your shoes? I mean, I wouldn't like to see that the auditors have to make these many entries, but it kind of, I don't know what to say besides it is what it is. We make a lot of entries like this and a lot of clients. We have some clients, I have a couple clients where we make 0 entries because they record everything just perfectly. It's a wide array throughout municipalities in Wisconsin. Yes, the one thing I'd be concerned about, Wendy, in your shoes is, well, are the monthly reports that I'm getting, are these accurate if they don't record all the adjusting journal entries? But that's I guess more to the, again, these were the entries that we have to make as part of the audit. We just come in and we piece stuff together. You could have, probably hired a CPA or someone and paid a lot of money to have them come in and do these for you at a more timely basis. But again, it's kind of a cost analysis that would need to be done by the city. More talent is usually more expensive. So I don't know.
Doesn't,
Join a question.
So it's not so much of a question as a statement.
Okay.
So like to record your prior year tax roll, those types of entries can be done by the clerk treasurer. So, that is part of our job. I've done them in the past. The same thing with, the thing with your debt activity, that one gets a little tricky because, if you're paying off debt and you're refinancing new debt, that you have to make sure you're allocating correctly. So that one, I would probably, confer to the auditor to help with that one, to make sure it's done correctly. Again, so just looking through this, some of these, when you're dealing with like your GASBs, I'm not going to touch those.
okay.
You want the auditor to do those, at least in my opinion, but he said he's got other municipalities that he doesn't have to even do those with. I guess for me, I would rather have more like training so that I understand what I'm doing with it before I tackle something like that. But yeah, so a lot of these, when you're talking about capital assets too, some of that is just, and some of that can become from talking with the auditors and just understanding, the numbers and where they're coming from and then just doing them. So it is something that a clerk treasurer can do to minimize their involvement and save, the municipality money.
Yeah, and Joanne, we are more than happy to do any sort of, training where, each year trying to knock some of these off, whereas you take them on and take them off our plate. We're obviously more than happy to help with that process.
Sure.
Because there's no reason that, you can take some of these on. Again, it just hasn't historically, it's just been, oh, well, the auditors always do these entries, so we save them. I think, I guess I can't speak for, employees of the past.
Right, and I agree that, a lot of times clerk treasurers will, the auditor's always done them and they just let them do them. But, after taking some classes that was completed by actually Baker Tilly representatives, they said that, they teach us how to do these journal entries ourselves. So they don't have to do them and it actually saves the municipality money. So
Typically in larger municipalities, you have a more diverse staff with more talent, skills and abilities.
right.
So larger communities typically will take care of more of these journal entries per se.
Mhm.
In a smaller community, it varies dramatically. Some of them are routinely done, as Justin has indicated, by the auditing firm, because they do it on a regular basis. They're trained, they're experts in this particular area. We have talent, skills and abilities, but we also know our limitations. And so with that, over time, I'm sure Joanne will be taking on more of these or whatever. It's a change in the organization is where we're going. And that being said, smaller communities, typically there's a lot of work that's done by the auditors. Larger communities, you have less work done by the auditors and more done by their staff, which are larger, more diverse, more trained.
Thanks, Joanne.
Yeah, I totally agree, Steve. I will say, I did mention, well, I have a couple clients, right, that don't have any entries. Those are large counties that have multiple CPAs on staff that are preparing their information. So that's the difference, really.
Any more questions, Wayne?
Not on this.
Please continue, Justin.
Okay, I'm going to then go over the financial highlights document. Do you all have that in front of you? Should say City of Kewaunee financial highlights.
Give us a-
I gave you the 4 documents that came in the mail today.
Oh yeah, there wouldn't have been this in the mail. This would have just been sent via PDF. Am I able to share my screen? I can always bring it up.
I'm not sure how that works.
I can try to share my screen. I just don't know if I'll have the permission to do it if I'm not, like a host or something on Zoom, but I can certainly try here if that's okay.
That, it was part of the packet, right? It was part of the.
packet was. Bear with us for a second, Justin, please.
That's gonna share my screen. I want to give him permission.
Yeah, no.
Participant.
Yeah. Maybe if you just click his box.
Titled that. Justin, would this be like the section that has the small Roman numerals, like starting with 1, 2, 3, 4, independent auditors report?
No,
financial results?
no, that would.
It's the graphs, it's the graphs.
Yeah, it's all the graphs and stuff.
Oh, I have
Yeah.
those.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Wendy.
Justin,
That's your-
are you able to co-host at this time now? Are you able to share your screen?
Let me give it a go.
I printed the graphs.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff.
Anytime. I stumble as good as anybody.
Are you able to see this document? It looks like I can see it on the screen, huh?
Yep, we see it.
Okay. And it sounds like you all do have this in front of you as well. So starting on page 1 here. So when assessing really, the financial health of a municipality, a good place to start is the general fund, as this is the main operating fund of the city where most of the day-to-day transactions run through. And specifically, we like to look at the general fund's fund balance, or as most people know it as the equity. And so the bar graph at the top shows the various types of fund balance with the definitions at the bottom, and how it was in 2020 compared to 2021. As we previously kind of went over here, the city has done a really good job the last handful of years to build up this fund balance. And in 2021, it finally went from a negative to a positive number, which is great to see. At the bottom is the non-spendable fund balance, which is at about 34,000. And this consists of items like prepaid items, as well as delinquent special assessment charges. And these fall into this bucket of fund balance because they are considered to not be in spendable form. Again, we already talked about this, but there is also that 89,000 showing up as assigned. Again, that is fund balance, which the city has assigned for various types of expenditures and projects. I think I mentioned the detail of that is on page 39 of the financial statements. And so then the last piece and the biggest piece is the unassigned fund balance, which was at 289,000 as of year end. And this is everything that essentially is left over and can be spent or not spent at the city's discretion. The other item I wanted to point out on this page briefly is a summarized income statement in the middle. Again, this is a very high level of the budget to actual, as we already discussed. The city budgeted for a net income about 50,000 in the general fund, but the actual net income was well over 400,000. And we kind of already went through kind of the main drivers of that large net income in the general fund in 2021. So then moving on to this next page. So this chart again focuses around the general fund balance, and one ratio that we like to calculate is taking the city's unrestricted fund balance that we just talked about and dividing it by the total general fund expenses for the year. And this is essentially saying, if we don't take in any more revenues, how long could we keep on covering our expenses by just using that fund balance that is available to us? So the city's ratios are in green, and you can see that it's a positive 11.4% for 2021, which equates to a little bit over a month. The blue dots are the average for other municipalities your size in Wisconsin, which are still, well above where Kewaunee is at. So while there has been positive change, over the last 5+ years, the city is still below the average for other municipalities in Wisconsin. So moving on to the next page. So another important area that we like to look at when determining the financial health of a municipality is its debt. So this chart shows what your statutory general obligation debt limit is, which is the black line. And that is 5% of the city's total equalized value. And it compares that to your actual general obligation debt outstanding, which is the green line. So at year end, the city has, essentially used up 53% of its debt capacity. And this is slightly higher than the average for municipalities your size in Wisconsin, which is closer to 40%. So a little higher, but nothing to be concerned about. But it's something that you'll want to monitor going forward, as I know the city has a number of possible projects in the pipeline that would need debt.
You said 40% is the usual?
Yeah, I'd say around 40% is more the average. Once you start getting over 50, then that's the point where it's kind of, you might want to just make sure you're watching this and conscious of it while you're, issuing any new debt after that. So for this page, so another ratio we like to calculate is your debt service to non-capital expenditures. Essentially, this ratio is saying what percentage of your normal routine expenditures do you have to devote to cover your debt service obligations? Because whatever is going to pay debt service can't go, to pay for something else. So you can see the city is the green line and the black dots are, again, the average for other municipalities in Wisconsin. You will see a large spike in 2021 to 37%. However, we talked about this a little bit, but I would say that this is artificially inflated and is nothing to worry about. That is because the city refunded that debt in 2021. And from an accounting perspective, we need to record the debt being paid off as, principal as an expense. And then we show the revenue coming in from the new debt. And so that really throws off this calculation. So if you would to just act like that refunding didn't happen, because essentially you're just switching debt for debt, your ratio would be very comparable to what it's been in prior years and very comparable to other municipalities your size in Wisconsin. So on to the next page here. So these last two pages relate to the water and sewer utilities. The chart at the top is showing the water utilities operating revenues, which are the green line, compared to the operating expenses, which is the black line. you can see that it's been pretty stable over the last 5 years. And the operating revenues saw a slight increase in 2021, mainly due to their rate increases during 2021. I believe in April that took effect. However, the operating results do not factor in the pilot, which is the payment in lieu of taxes. This is the tax that the water pays to the general fund. It also doesn't include interest expense on the water utilities debt, as these are all considered non-operating expenses for accounting purposes. So when you factor in these other expenses, the total net income was actually a loss of about 81,000 for 2021. I do believe, though, Karen is currently working through possible rate increases for the water utility with the PSC. But so then under the chart, you will see that the water utility has about 11.89 months of cash on hand, which is a very healthy cash position. The other item I wanted to point out is the debt coverage section. So some of the water utility revenue debt that you have has a required debt coverage ratio of 1.25, which is essentially a calculation making sure that the water utility will have enough cash to pay off the future debt service payments. And the actual debt coverage was 2.86, which is well above this minimum requirement, which is good to see.
What's the averages for other municipalities?
Do you mean as far as the debt coverage?
Mhm.
Or?
Yes.
I would say it varies greatly. I have never come across a municipality that did not meet its debt coverage factor. There's some that are very close, but usually I would say, I guess on average, it would be close to twice the required amount, if not a little less. So I would say you're close to being average right now from that perspective. And there is, in our footnotes of the financial statements, there is a page that kind of breaks down how this debt coverage is actually calculated and what components it uses. But again, you're well above the debt coverage, so all good from that perspective.
Wendy?
Justin, I have a question about the percentages, the actual rate of return, authorized rate of return, current year and prior year. Can you explain those a little bit? Why they changed and
Yeah, yep. So the water utility, is run by the Public Services Commission. So they actually set an authorized rate of return. For the water utility specifically, they have nothing to do with the sewer utility. And then there's a calculation that's done to kind of determine the actual rate of return that happened, which then they could use to, if there was a rate study done, they would then, use these factors to determine, well, what should the rates actually be to meet that authorized rate of return? As far as it being below the authorized rate of return, a lot of times that happens if there's like a one-off expenditure or something in that nature that kind of, again, increase your expenses to more than what they thought it was going to be, which then reduces the actual rate of return. I'd have to look at the actual, PSC report that was filed. I did not prepare that this year to see, why this was so low compared to the authorized rate of return. But again, usually it's more if expenditures were higher than anticipated or revenues were lower than anticipated to kind of create that large difference.
okay. And you said the water utility is the one that changed it from 6.6% to 4.9? It's just
Yeah,
a regulatory thing?
Yeah. The Public Services Commission doesn't have anything to do with the sewer utility. The water utility is the only one that's regulated by the state statutes. So the last page here. So for the sewer utility, again, the chart at the top is showing the operating revenues and expenses, which is showing a positive operating income of about 112,000 for 2021. But again, when you factor in some of the non-operating expenses, which are in this case interest on the debt, as well as some debt issuance costs related to those refundings that happened. This actually came out to a total net loss of about 3,000 for 2021, so very small, but it still was a net loss for 2021 for the sewer utility. The months of cash on hand is, it's not as strong as a water utility, but still nothing to worry about. And similar to the water utility, the sewer utility does not have or it has a debt coverage requirement related to the debt it has outstanding, but it easily met that requirement in 2021, as well as the last, again, I don't think Kewaunee's ever not met its debt coverage bond covenants. Any questions on these items, or any other questions at all?
So I guess I have a question on the investment in capital for both water and sewer. It seems alarming to me that we have 97% debt in water and 57% debt in sewer. Tell me why I shouldn't worry about that.
Yeah. So for the sewer, I would say kind of that ratio. So yeah, like you said, Wendy, essentially this is showing, okay, how much of your capital, of your capital assets is financed by, it's essentially paid off, right? It's equity, or how much is financed by debt. And so the sewer, I would say, is pretty average, having that, close to 50-50 share. The water utility is, as you said, more concerning, right? Where it's a huge portion of it relates to debt. Normally, you would have a high percentage of it related to debt. If you just did like a huge project, right? You redid some large items that you took out debt for. So I'd honestly, I'd have to look at like why it's so high, but that is a large percentage to be shown as the debt component of your investment in capital, because it's almost 100%, right?
97.
Yeah, but the water utility does, again, it does have a lot of cash on hand. I wouldn't say there's anything, super concerning about the financial health of the water utility. Besides that, it did still have that net loss in 2021. These funds should really be self-sufficient, and not be having a net loss, each year. But again, I think that's why Karen is working with the PSC to look at the rates that are being charged for the water utility.
Justin Rich Taylor here. Can you tell me when and how we got to 97%?
Yeah, Rich, I'm probably going to have to look at that in more detail just to make sure that it's actually calculating right, because it is really high. But I can send, a response to like Steve and Joanne to then forward to the council.
I would appreciate if you could just find out the answer to that, please. Thank you.
Yep, for sure.
I would venture some of that's related to the reduction in the water loss and improvements or rehabilitation of water mains and other infrastructure related to pumping, storage, transmission, and that type of thing. I don't, Tony, do you have any insight on that?
Not really, but I think doesn't the age of your infrastructure take care of that stuff too? If I'm not mistaken. Yes, I think depreciation's figured in all that too, which I know the water and the sewer both have like hundreds of thousands of dollars that you take out the budget right from the start, just based off of depreciation. So it's a number that shows up in accounting, but none of it's not physically spent. Yep.
So Justin, I don't know if you heard what Brandon said, but if depreciation is what's factored into that, because if we're looking at the water utilities 2021 budget, it would have been a balanced budget. So if 2021 is when this majority of the 97% was incurred, it should be easily figured out how it happened, unless it's just something as simple as depreciation factored in and actually not money. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm assuming it wouldn't have just happened in 2021.
No, I remember that it was at 97% last year. It was at 97.
Actually, I have it right here, 94% last year for water, 57 for sewer.
Okay, 94%. I knew it was in the 90s.
Yeah, so it might be from a couple years back. Um, again, normally it's if you had a huge project that happened that you took debt out for the water utility. But I'll definitely look into that and get a response to the council.
Thank you, I'd appreciate that answer.
Hold on, guys. Tony's saying
Are we
something.
still paying for projects from 2015 and prior to that too? You know, that's all debt that's being paid yet from 20 years ago, yeah, I guarantee you.
Harrison Street, First Street.
River Road,
Mhm.
Ellis Street might not be out there anymore, but that's 20 years ago. Last couple years ago, we were still paying for that yet too, so. I mean, stuff that's how old and still paying for.
Was that infrastructure reconstruction then, basically?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, like I said, there's depreciation, there's buildings, I mean, there's 60-some years old. The building next to it's the well one, built 1908. I mean, that all comes out of that. Doesn't take much to really knock that down. I know that there's, I don't know, you can really get into nitty-gritty with crap, but there's, what is it? Since it's a utility that makes money, there, I pay taxes actually 200 grand a year for that, you know, for having that building there. That's the offset what could be potential tax revenue from the private, that property. So.
Yeah.
Comes into play also.
Yep. And so again, I'll get a more detailed response, but just from a really high level, this is page 39 of the financials. And this section right here calculates what is your net investment in capital assets. And so, you know, as I think was that Tony speaking, it shows, well, here's your capital assets, right? Net of of the depreciation. And then here's how much debt you have outstanding related to that. So it's a large portion of your actual capital assets outstanding. Again, net of depreciation. So again, if there's, you know, I think Tony was alluding to this, if you have a bunch of old, you know, water utility infrastructure assets, stuff like that, that's been really depreciated over the years, but you still have a bunch of debt outstanding related to that. That's why these numbers here are so close and why that equity would be such a small piece of it. Again, this calculation is it's your total business type activities. So it's showing both, it's combining your sewer and water into one calculation. But I'm assuming the water is the big piece of why these two numbers are so close. So that's all I had from the financial highlights. Are there any other questions on any of the other documents that we?
I have a question.
Robin.
This is Robin Nelson. It was about the lighthouse preservation, the general fund. It was to cover a fund deficit. The money was taken out. It was 11,152. The lighthouse did bring a check and made a donation as far as 10/15/2019. And that was to cover a door that we had purchased. So it was it's concerning to me because it makes it look like that came out of the taxpayer money.
Yeah, and so I looked into this briefly. So that 11,000 or so amount I don't believe it has anything to do with that donation that you just talked about. It just happened to be similar size.
Well,
So-
there was nothing with the lighthouse that cost $11,000.
So yeah, and so I looked back, and I'd have to look to make sure I'm getting this right, but it was like before 2018, the lighthouse fund was in a deficit of like $10,000.
That was another incident when we did, we brought a check in and it was brought in the year before and we did the abatement. And so I guess maybe it was just an accounting issue, number issues that the money was brought in the year before and it was never reconciled to a segregated fund.
Yeah, yeah, and so, my recommendation to the city would be, whether it's, Joanne or Steve or someone, there's not a lot of activity in this fund from year to year. So you could probably look in Banyan in the historical data and figure out, well, what are we missing? Because either you got a donation in and it was deposited into the general fund versus being deposited into the lighthouse preservation fund. Is again, if really those should always have balanced, and with a net income of about 0 and fund balance of 0, then something probably wasn't deposited into the lighthouse preservation fund that should have been. But again, it's been, I think in 2017 there was like a $9,000 deficit. So this deficit's been kind of carrying forward every year, and I don't know the exact origin of it, but hopefully looking in Banyan, you'd be able to determine, again, if there was an expenditure but no associated revenue or vice versa. But that's
Also-
why,
Okay,
actually talking with Terry, this deficit has been carrying forward. So we're like, are you expecting to get donations in for this? The answer was no. So then instead
because
of
the
having,
donation was already given for it. This was an after the fact. We had to bring the money in before the expenditure was made.
I don't believe the money was coded properly, Justin, when it was received. And so then when the expense occurred, it was just then coded to the lighthouse. And so it's an accounting thing that I think as long as the coding is clear, if there's a better way that we can track donations in that fund, it is a separate fund. And I guess going forward with our new system and things that we talked about earlier, that hopefully will make some of that easier going forward.
yeah, because in that fund, like you said, you have a separate fund in your accounting system specifically set up for the lighthouse preservation fund, and you have specific accounts within that for donations and expenditures. So for there to be, this deficit throughout the years, at some point, some revenue, again, if again there should have been a revenue and an expense for all these different items, then likely a revenue was missed and it was deposited in the general fund when it should have hit the lighthouse preservation fund. Because I can see the recent revenues and expenses the last couple of years that were talked about. I can see those hitting revenues and expenses. That's not the issue. It would be prior to 2018 or even 2017 that this happened.
So how would we on an accounting basis take that line item and make that a balance 0, which is what it should be? It should not have a deficit at this time. How would we rate that? That'd have to get reassigned to the general fund?
Yeah, so essentially, after talking with Terry about, that this is just keeps accumulating, it's always negative. Again, is there a specific donation coming in that's going to cover this eventually? The answer was no. So then do you want to transfer, money from the general fund just to make this whole? Otherwise, it's never going to be whole. So that's what happened in 2021, was that the money was transferred from the general fund to make this fund whole.
Check numbers.
Yeah, check number 676, actually.
So for now, it should be whole, and going forward, as long as we've got things better coded, better tracked.
Right, but I also want to bring up the fact that the lighthouse was given, that we went over budget and we never had a budget either. It says we have 6,660 in expenditures for the lighthouse, and that we were budgeted 6,500. And we were never, there was a point where the city committed to putting aside 10,000 a year, but that had since been eliminated by Fred. So when I saw this come up, I'm like, we never spent any money or went over budget.
Are you saying
You
you
never
didn't
got any
have?
money from the city.
No, not in the Lighthouse Preservation Fund, so I'm not sure where this is from. And I did look back into the 2021 budget, because it said that it would be, that I could look there and that would explain it a little, but it only has the budget. It doesn't have the expenses.
So
Justin, you're saying that basically we should take a transfer of funds from the general fund to offset that negative balance that shows up in the lighthouse fund, and that would then bring that back to 0. Is that correct?
Yep, so that's what we did in 2021. So it is at zero at year end. So now it's kind of starting fresh. Now if the city
Yeah.
wants to look into like, well, where did this go wrong back in the day? Should it really have, that transfer really have come from the general fund? I don't know where else it would have came from. It had to have been the general fund. Then yeah, you can definitely do so, but
Well,
right,
I guess I just want to clarify that taxpayer money did not pay for the lighthouse, door. It was paid for through donations. We received the money from individuals and that's where the money did come from. But I understand you have to correct the accounting situation. So thank you.
gotcha. Yep, that could very well be the case. I just can't necessarily attest to why that difference was like that from years past.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I have a question. I see on page 28, historic treasure. What is historic treasure for 148,560?
What page was that?
28 in the financial statements. Or the,
Yep, yeah, historic treasure. Let me put that just out quick. So that is the lighthouse, which was given to the city by the U.S. Department of Interior in 2011. And so it was the city's intention to preserve the structure as a historic treasure. And so that's why it was recorded as a historic treasure starting in 2011.
Obviously gold in the crypt.
Well, for now, it's no longer in there, so that treasure's out.
okay. The bank loan for $404,000 was taken out 4/8/2021. It doesn't appear that, and this is on page 33. So that bank loan was for the roof, Scott Street connection, and the loader. And that's correct? Is that's what that debt is for? Because I'm just a little confused. So I guess my big question is, nothing has been paid off. Has nothing been paid off on that loan at all?
Yeah, usually in the year of issuance. So if this was taken out April 8th in 2021, they wouldn't have any debt service payments
Until-
in that year. So it probably starts in 2022.
Okay,
But yeah, that is my understanding what that was used for as well.
okay. Then I have another, I think this is my last question.
Well, let's see if I get this on record.
Okay, so on page 60, there is a Scott Street Connection Capital Project Fund, capital outlay of 84,263. What is that? 60.
So you're talking about this number, right?
If I could see it, I would say yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I'm asking about. That's the number I'm asking about.
and I probably won't have. So we have, from what I can see, there is some engineering fees of about, a little bit over $11,000.
Yes,
And let me look at. Then there's a $73,000 account. It's titled Capital Outlay. So let me see what the detail of that is.
Does anybody recall
Nope.
approving $73,000 to Scott Street?
I do not recall that.
So, yeah, so here's why I think why it's confusing. So that 73,000 relates to the new loader. And so I believe, and I guess I can't necessarily speak for Terry, but so again, that 404,000 was taken out for those various projects, including the new loader. And so then the Scott Street Connection Capital Project Fund is essentially recording everything related to that $404,000 debt. So it has some very, again, 11,000 or so of actually engineering fees, I'm assuming related to Scott Street, and then also has $73,000 to Brooks Tractor for
Brandon,
that new
Was that a
loader.
50% match on that grant?
For the loader?
Yeah.
I think that was 30% grant, 70% city funds. But I know that it was set up at the time that like down payment was being made out of like the sewer utility, the water utility. Three parts, everybody that was contributing towards it. They had a pretty heavy payment. I don't know the exact dollar amount, however, it wasn't a lot. That 70 members, 1,000 sounds like that's probably pretty close. I don't think what the actual dollar on that would be like that. If I have it in front of me, it sounds close.
Yeah, Justin, I just got a question on that Scott Street construction too. If part of that Scott Street, if part of that expenditure was the loader, would that be an accurate accounting entry to charge the loader off to a Scott Street construction project? Because it says Scott Street construction. Shouldn't just on what is attributed to Scott Street construction be under Scott Street construction, not a loader?
Yeah, so
Put part of a loader under Scott Street construction if we purchase the loader.
No, that's okay.
and so we just kind of base it off what your accounting system shows these funds as. So we use it. So I totally get that this looks misleading now that it's pointed out, right? Where it says Scott Street Construct
Yeah, it's very
Connection.
misleading, actually.
But then I guess we'd have to title it something next year, like whether, because really, again, it all relates to that $404,000 debt, which is why there's 300,000 or so remaining in that fund. So it would really depend what you want to call this fund next year, and we can certainly make that change, because I agree it's misleading when it contains other items besides just Scott Street.
I would like to do that.
I'll make a note in our file to make sure that change gets made.
So that would be the capital projects fund, but under a different entitled title.
Brent had to mention on this.
Yeah, and that was a kind of a goofy one. That was the roof, the loader and Scott Street were all borrowed under the same loan.
Yes.
So since they're all tied to the same amount that was borrowed, no matter what you call it, it's gonna be kind of goofy, I think, because it was all lumped together. If you change it to loader, then still some of it's gonna be for the roof payment or for Scott Street, vice versa. I think it's no matter how you phrase it or it shows up on paper, because it was all part of the same loan, it's gonna look goofy just because it's related to three totally separate different things.
The
The roof loader, whatever.
Yeah, either way, it's gonna be the same thing. It's, yeah, like I said, it was all borrowed at the same time, probably to get a lower interest rate or whatever it would be.
Everything under,
Oh, yeah, I agree 100%.
putting parts, paint, towels, everything under.
And so there was a press release, I don't know, I thought I made a copy of it, but it suggested that the loader was actually on a different loan. Is there any chance that it's on the city's Facebook page, and I thought I printed it out, but I don't seem to have it. Do you have any recollection of that?
It was part of a grant. So the grant was through rural development. I know that. So that was I think it was a 70-30 split, that 30% of it was covered.
And
By
then and
grant
the different
funds, then
departments
the-
contributed and the general.
Yeah, it was kind of a shared cost type thing. But then the additional funds had to be borrowed for it. I think it just got lumped with everything else is kind of what happened.
But in the press release, it was a different interest rate, a different number, and not included with the 404,000.
Yeah,
I'm
it was
just saying-
additionally, it was through rural development. A lot of the times with rural development, it's a grant portion, a portion of it is a grant, and then a percentage of it or a portion of it is loaned through rural development. And I don't know if
Okay.
like that one giant loan for the loader, the roof and the Scott Street was a lower interest rate that had paid off that other debt or whatever. I don't know how that all shook out. I'm not sure on that. But yeah, it was, it's usually with rural development stuff, it's really low interest rates with a portion of that being grant funds is normally how rural development stuff works.
Not really answering the question, but well,
Try it, try it.
Well,
okay.
but I remember that a little bit too, but I can't remember the exact specifications of it, so.
Anybody else?
Thanks, Brandon.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Justin?
So I'll just say, a lot of clients, they'll just have like one capital projects fund and it'll be called capital projects. The city has historically kind of broken it out by, again, each project had its own fund. But again, if you wanted to just kind of roll everything up into one fund, it'd probably be easier to title. Unlike, if Brandon said, well, are you really going to title this like, 4 different things would look probably weird on the statements, but we can definitely, I'll put a note and we'll discuss it for the audit next year to make sure it's appropriately titled how you want.
Justin, as long as I got you here, we've got another item on the agenda, which is tugboat fund segregation of revenue. We had a request from some of the people involved with the tugboat. They take in revenue through admissions and donations on an annual basis. And they were wondering what would be the best way to handle that from a segregation of funds to make sure that those dollars that come from the tug stay with the tug versus being lumped in with the general fund revenue. Any thoughts on what your recommendation would be to handle that?
Yep. So the easiest probably would be, it depends if you want to create a new fund related to the tug, where the donations would just go right as a revenue right in that fund. And then you'd be able to track, okay, what expenditures are happening, because any expenditures that hit that fund would hit just that specific fund. So that's one way to track it. If you want to just record that revenue in the general fund and not set up a new fund, you can always just track. You'd have to track it essentially externally. A lot of people use like an Excel document that kind of will list out, here's the revenues and here's all the expenses that have then been used so far. And then at the end of the year, we would show, a restricted or an assigned fund balance in the general fund for whatever remaining donations are there. But again, that would have to be tracked by the city somehow if you didn't want to set up a new fund.
What's the cleanest way to do this and the easiest way to do it?
How much are the donations, I guess? Is it significant?
11 to 15,000, somewhere in that range between admissions and donations annually. And one of the things is they're going to have to paint that thing, and they figure that the cost on that's going to run, I believe, $60,000 when it's all said and done. So the bottom line is if you're taking in revenue for that and you want to allocate that to that particular project, it's probably best to keep it separate in some fashion or format. And I would like to do it in the most efficient, reasonable manner so it's easiest for Joanne.
Yeah, for sure. I would say, the most efficient for me would be if you just included in the general fund and you kept, again, a tracking sheet showing what the balance should be at year end every year for the audit that then I could use. So then it really comes down to how Joanne would want to do it, though. If she thinks it's easier just creating a new fund, or if she wants to incorporate it into the general fund.
Joanne and him can discuss that, huh?
Mhm. Instead of, in my opinion, instead of creating a whole new fund, you would create a sub account in your accounting, and you'll have a revenue account and you'll have an expense account. So everything will be going through that sub account. And that way, you can do reports showing all your expenditures and all your revenues.
Per
It's still-
entity? Per entity, like when you're entering that, if you have tug, it'll pull everything that went from the tug at
Right.
segregation.
Yeah, you could do it as a sub account, or you could have it as its own, like in the general fund, you could have it as, like its own
Line item.
general ledger line item. And all the revenues will go into that. And then you could have an expense account and all the expenses will come out of that. So then you can do like a detail, transaction detail, and you'll see all of, what expenses or what all the revenues were.
Because we had
Yep.
talked, we had talked about the public works, some of the stuff that that department was doing down there, and some of it's minimal, but even talking with Nate, there might be the occasion where some of that needs to get charged back to public works, right? So that would be an expense side. Charge the tug, so. Right.
Well, you wouldn't have to create a bill. I mean, whatever bill that you're going to get for that, are you doing the work or are you hiring the work? By you guys? That's just an allocation through payroll that could hit that general ledger account.
Okay.
And we'll know that.
So Joanne, could you do the same thing for the lighthouse, or has that been done for the lighthouse?
I don't know if
The
it's.
sub account?
Okay, what we do with the lighthouse, we have a nonprofit, so all our raising, all our money, anytime we had a big project or something, we would come to the city, say, this is our project. And we would have our estimate or invoice, whatever, for the project. It would be approved by the city. We would pay. As soon as they approved it, we would pay the money. What would happen a lot of times was because it was in another year from, like 2019 was when we paid for the door. And then the door got paid for in 2020. Well, all of a sudden, because it was later, the money, because it wasn't tracked.
Justin, isn't that just a matter of booking it back? Or just making sure that you're referencing that in the audit?
Is this for the lighthouse?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the lighthouse, it does have separate accounts in the accounting system. It's a completely separate fund, unlike it's not included within the general fund like Joanne was talking about doing with the other item. But so as far as the expenses happening in one year and then donations in another year, the timing effect really wouldn't have an impact to why there was that negative $11,000 fund deficit, because that's just always been there. So there was at some point there was something again recorded in the general fund, like a donation that should have been recorded in the lighthouse fund, or something like that, because this would have flushed itself out then over time, right? And it hasn't. So there was something miscoded. We assumed again that a donation was recorded in the general fund at some point, should have been in the lighthouse fund, and that's why that transfer was made to true up the lighthouse fund, so it's at 0 at the end of 2021.
It really shouldn't matter that it's crossing years. But
Yeah,
this
because
this
it
was
would
something
flush
that
out.
was Yeah, this one was something that was misallocated
Okay.
and it was never corrected.
Somehow that extra $11,000 should have shown up somewhere in the general
Who
fund.
knows where it is? They could have put it,
Cash carry over, whatever, who knows?
yeah, it could be, and it just got carried over in the fund balance.
That happened to us twice, so.
So, yeah, we'll get it figured out.
So sub account for tugboat and then.
We have an account apparently,
You have a fund.
As long as it's
but we have. people-
tracked accordingly.
We're in track.
Any other questions, guys? Anything else, Justin?
Nope, that's all I have.
Do we need a motion to approve this?
Yes.
I approve and place on file, yeah. Accept and place on file.
But we gotta move it up too.
I would
We gotta
like to
move
make
it
a
up to
motion
council.
to approve, to move this up to council to approve the audit for 2021 from Baker Tilly.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving forward.
Justin, thank you and get better.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I'll get back to you on those couple of items too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving forward to item C, conversion to committee of jurisdictions, ordinance code change.
So I had mentioned this previously, that I wanted to go back to standing committees. in place of the cow. And the procedure for that is we're gonna have 2 readings, correct? Steve?
Yep.
And the structure you've got laid out in your packet. If I can get to it here. Hold on.
Did you type all this out, Steve?
No, I didn't.
So the only one that will need a little further clarification.
Page 144.
Yeah, this is ordinance number 6322022. An ordinance to repeal and recreate section 2/31 of the City of Kewaunee Municipal Code regarding committees of jurisdiction. This would be considered the first reading. In time for the second reading, I'd like the council working in tandem with the mayor to come up with the duties to be defined for the Public Property Committee. We went back to 2017 to try and find out how it was written in 2017, and we found out there were 2 readings. We could not find the document itself. Joanne provided me with a document from a previous municipality she worked with. We hybridized that, ran it past Randy Nesbitt. Randy drafted this particular document, and basically it sets up the 4 committees of jurisdiction: finance, personnel, public works, and public property. It defines the duties of the committee with the exception of public property, which will be defined on July 11th. And puts the wheels into motion relative to going from committee of the whole to committees of jurisdiction.
So the only recommendation that I had on this was on the personnel committee, that having the ad hoc non-voting member. We had not had that in the past. This was copied over from the other jurisdiction that you had. So I proposed line number 10 underneath that to be stricken. But it's up to you guys. So yeah, it's gonna be looking at this and making a motion to the council.
To explain number 10 was the reason why that municipality did it was that if you were talking about public works, you would bring in like the public works supervisor or DPW director, whatever title that person would have. And they would be involved in that issue. If it was like a clerk's office issue, the clerk, would be there as the ad hoc committee member. Or if it would, or the police department would be the police chief. That's why that was written in there that way.
And I like that idea. I
And
think
it's
that
fine.
makes
I mean,
sense.
we just always did that. I mean, if we had a public works situation, we would have a public works.
But with past experiences lately, I think it needs to be spelled out, and I like that it's.
That's up to you
spelled out.
guys. You can do it however you like, but the format then, like you were asking, Eric, is if we could recommend this on to council, either as is, no changes, or changes if you so desire. And then our special council meeting tonight, it's on there, correct? That we would then make that first reading official. And then at our next July meeting, we'd have the second reading and it would be complete.
So should we add that under each one of the committees? Because you don't have it under public works, or do you?
Well, this one's in personnel, and because it's personnel, they wanted to have a representative from that department that they're talking about
Right.
beyond that. That's what he's.
Yep, correct.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
Does anybody have a preference?
Nope, I
like the way it is.
do too.
Looking for a motion.
Before, there's just one in the finance committee, number 3, if we could change caring to carrying. Just a little thing.
But she is caring, but that's okay.
I know.
So that would have to be just included in the motion, just that minor amendment,
It's an editorial.
just an edit here.
Oh, carrying out. Yeah, okay, I got it written. What number is that?
Number three
Under
of,
finance.
letter A, finance committee.
Spelling typo, editorial change.
Got it.
Is there a motion yet?
I'll make the motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the first reading of the conversion of the committee of jurisdiction. Well,
No, send it to council.
With the.
with the one editorial change. I'll second it.
Carrying.
Carrying. But we can-
Roll call or all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So we've already done the type of this, but that one-
Well,
Yes, sir, yeah. That's,
we're not there yet.
Number D, seasonal employee wage rate modification of the future.
So see with the hiring process with seasonal employees, we had lost an employee due to better offers in the city here. One was through the high school. So it came to my attention that we're not exactly competitive with our wage anymore. So what I did is I talked to Steve about this. He recommended we bring it to the cow for further discussion. I had talked to the city of Algoma. They're currently at a $12.50 to a $15 slot for wages. And this, the handout I gave you, we got from the high school. And that was from this year's cycle of hiring. And you can see that on there, they're at 11 to 14 is their slot of wages for their seasonal help. So just going forward, so, you know, getting applicants is getting harder and harder to get on a regular basis. I think we need to be more competitive with our wages. Huh? Typically, we hire on at 11. It's about a 50-cent raise for every year of return service. So I guess what I was looking into is possibly doing a slot of wages that would get approved that we could work within. So if you get an employee that is, you know, stand out, has more qualifications, first aid, et cetera, you can give them a little higher up on the scale. You're bringing an employee in that needs training on almost every aspect. You'd be a little lower on the scale, but we're still working within an approved slotted wage gap, I guess is what I would recommend. Like I said, I talked to Mr. Matt Murphy at Algoma. They're at $12.50 to $15 is their wage slot.
Is that working out all right for them?
He said they're still struggling getting employees, but it's easier to attract more qualified, I guess, would be, you know, every little bit helps in especially a high schooler is typically what you're after for this type of work. Every dollar kind of counts, especially with gas prices, everything else going through the roof. So I think it would be in our best interest to make this more aggressive, more comparable to the two local entities that we'd be competing with. Best case scenario, we could implement it maybe this year and throw some enticement to the people that we do have, maybe get them to return next year, or we implement this for next year. I guess that would be up to your guys' direction and approval.
I guess I'm wondering what would you recommend as a,
Similar to the Algoma, talking with Sean, I don't know if you have anything to throw in or you just want me to keep going.
Well, with summer help, we kind of open that up to anybody as opposed to just high school kids. So in that factor, we could essentially have someone that could come in and do a lot more stuff. If they knew they were gonna get a little better wage for just the seasonal outfit. So.
Actually, they're asking if you can stand up so I can hear you better.
So our summer help is open to not just high school kids, it's open to all or anybody. So if we increase that wage and be a little more competitive with the school, Algoma, Two Rivers, whatnot, close entities. I mean, right now you can go to Hobby Lobby and make $18.50 starting. I'm not saying that's full time. This is just a
Yeah,
part-time
Quick Trip
job for
pays
seasonal summer.
$14.50.
So
So-
that's just to be a little bit more competitive, we could possibly get in someone a little more qualified that has age experience that we could cross-fit into any department. Possibly turn into a full-time employee if say someone's retiring, someone gets hurt,
Say
to jump
semi-retired.
into that role.
So what are some of the pay scales of some of the people that are returning? So if they're starting out at 11, I mean, $11, I can say was the starting wage for summer help a long time ago.
We have two employees that returned. One came, well, Thomas technically is a returning city employee. So they're both at the 11.50, the two, or the new ones are at 11, so.
So it was very competitive wages back
Yeah,
in the day.
updated,
It was very
yes.
good. That was all part of the union and that was what the kids weren't union, but that was fought for by the union. So I think we're definitely underpaying. The one thing that I guess the Public Works Committee can look at once that's assembled is how they want to structure the part-time seasonal help coming in. It's always kind of been the city's position that we want an opportunity for our high school kids in the summer. And I think what you're saying, Sean, does make sense too. If we get somebody in the door that turns out that they're good and they could possibly move up, that's a good point.
That's kind of where I came from.
That's a
10
good
years ago.
point.
I was working part-time for a summer after
So
Morez, so
something else to consider. But I think we at least need to be looking at more competitive with what else is available for these people because it's a competition.
Oh, and I agree, and that's why if we could even maybe implement it this year, it might entice the ones that still have a year left in high school to come back to the city instead
like
of
to see
searching
that.
elsewhere. I know Sean puts decent amount of time into training them how to, take care of the parks in the way that we would like them, and it'd be nice if we wouldn't have to do that every year and can keep employees going back. And there's also that option for future growth with the city. With promotion.
So.
My recommendation would be to go for like the Algoma. They're
12.50.
right in the middle to giving the high end. It leaves room for, I guess, assessing the employee as they grow.
What are you saying on the high end?
Well, the 12.50 to 15 is the slot that
Okay.
Algoma's at. If you
So-
want to go to the 12, like 12.50 to 14, like the high school, that's fine too. It
Well,
just, it
but
leaves.
it's
12.50 to 15, and that'll be up to the hiring committee.
Okay, that's what I'll make a motion to approve, the wage to 12, what? 12 to 15.
12.50 to 15.
12.50 to 15. Well, even if it was 12, they could still go 12.50. Okay, so 12.50 to 15, the range there. Approve that. Move it up to council.
I'll second that.
Okay.
This one have to do a roll call on.
Yeah.
It's money. So.
Well, it's moving it up. though.
Council, so.
And just to clarify, I'm sorry, to be acted out this year?
Yes.
For the current
yeah,
employees?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll go on the agenda for the 11th. We had enough other things to deal with tonight, but it'll go on the 11th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Well, I will do it if you tell me to go for roll call.
Go for roll call.
All right. Eric Woznicki,
Yes.
Kathy Brown,
Yes.
John Blaha,
Yes.
James Brewster is absent. Wendy Shelton.
Aye.
Janita Zimmerman,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Richard Taylor.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
So the other thing, Eric, when we do roll call, you want to like call out that.
It was a unanimous vote with the council members, motion carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Letter E, I think we addressed.
Joanne, do you feel comfortable with what our discussion was, the tugboat fund relative to what we're gonna do?
I am, if they are.
Yeah, you guys are in agreement?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, I would say.
Doesn't
I
it?
mean, to me, it's just an accounting practice.
Okay.
So I don't know, I mean,
She's just got the directive. She understands
Yes.
what she needs to do.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay,
All good.
We're good.
we're good.
F, municipal accounting payroll utility software purchase and to allocate the funds for purchase, approval, recommendation. Joanne?
yes, yeah. So I had two software companies, Civic Systems and another one called Workforce Software, come in to do demonstrations. I worked with Civic probably, 15 years ago. And then, so I didn't know if it was the same. It's relatively the same. They've added new stuff to it, of course, to make it, viable for today's age and requirements. So I brought them in to show me, and then Karen sat in on it as well. It had some, great aspects. I think it could be overwhelming, I guess, because they have a lot of stuff that they offer that may not get utilized. So I brought in Workhorse. I've had probably close to 15 years of experience, maybe even more than that, with that software. It's very simplistic. It's going to do what we need it to do without all these extra bells and whistles. Okay. I always relate it to as being, simple, that probably, a child could probably come in and run it. It's a company that was created by a man in Wisconsin for Wisconsin municipalities, and he has grown over the 25 years that he has, had the software. He has since retired. Now he just works as kind of a consultant for them, but he kind of sold it to his employees. So it's employee run. They recruit clerks to work for them, to be their support, to help out when we have questions. So the price of it was considerably less than Civic Plus, as well as the annual support fees are, probably maybe $1,500 less. I don't know. I don't have my report here in front of me because it's very deep in here. So I'm not sure if I put it all into that report, but my recommendation is to go with Workhorse because I have the knowledge of it. It would be a lot easier for me to do training with Karen and then with Maria, our new employee. If I go to Civic, or we would go to Civic, we're all going to be learning and we're all going to be, trying to figure it out. The difference between the two companies, where Civic would charge us to come in and do the training, they would charge us hotel, mileage, and a fee for them to be here. Workhorse does not charge that. So there's, that's why I'm saying there's a considerable savings. That's just part of their, when we purchase the software, they give us X amount of hours to come in and do that, to do the training, which will be minimal because of the fact that I have the knowledge on how to use the system.
So we kind of bounced that off Justin when we had him on a phone conference a week or whatever ago. And he indicated there wouldn't be any problem with them doing any of the work that they do with Workhorse.
Right, they have other customers that have Workhorse, so that they are familiar with it. In granted, Civic Plus is their software. One of the municipalities that I worked with many years ago that had the Civic, their auditor was Baker Tilly, and she even at that point suggested that we get rid of Civic because, it was just, not that Civic was bad, but just that, it just wasn't being utilized correctly, and it was, garbage in, garbage out. And, she supported the municipality at that time, Eric. But she supported Janita.
So updates, they do like regular updates with
Oh,
it.
yes. Yep, that's all
And-
free.
And it's easily trainable. That's
Yes.
what I want to
They
say.
have, and they have like webinars. They've been doing webinars. They have you could go into their module and you can print off like a steps process for doing everything that like every option that they have. So if it's utility billing, you can go in and you can print off a steps checklist of how, each step of what to do. This is what you do now. This is what you do. They give you they even have snapshots of what the screens should look like. I even went back years ago. I even created my own process of, every step. And, it was, it's very simple.
Okay.
So is this like a relational database where it just will auto-populate data that's entered in one place and then it appears in other places where it's also needed? Does it do that?
What do you mean by that? Can you explain that further?
Like if you would get, say, a ledger entry, say, you've received some money, you've made a payment and it's accounted for in more than one place, right? Like it would show up somewhere in a public works department, but then it's also would be there with your cash flow, like money that you've, spent,
Right.
it would go out. So would that show up on your, on the ledger for that?
Whatever you enter in, it's gonna show up as in your cash report. It's gonna, and then it'll show you where we've put it into the general ledger.
Okay, so it does auto-populate in other places where it's needed.
So
Right.
White House will get proper
So you're
credit.
not.
As long as I.
Just saying.
As long as we.
So it saves you work because you don't have to go plug in the numbers in more than one place
No.
for the same number.
No, and a lot of the stuff that we're gonna be doing in workforce, is repetitious. So we won't have to recreate the wheel. So like right now, when we go into pay, like even accounts payable, when we go into accounts payable in Banyan, we're recreating the wheel.
Yeah.
If I'm paying, I can't, come up with a name, Badger trailer, okay, for lack of a better, if I'm gonna pay them and I've already paid them, I can just hit like the past, it's a button, preview or whatever. It'll bring up what I paid them the last time. And if it's going to the same account, all I have to do is change invoice number and change the dollar amount and the date. And this way, so it's done.
Saves a lot of steps.
It does. They've made it very efficient. Workhorse, both companies hold conferences to listen to their customers and the needs of the customers, and they revamp their softwares to be able to offer what the customers need. So
I guess I understand because in our office, in our situation, we have ACOM and it goes from 1 to 7 doctors and we have way more things than we're ever going to use. We don't do personal injury. We don't do a lot of auto accident, but so it's got so much thing we're not even utilizing. And this, I'm sure, sounds like it's more appropriate for a smaller community.
Well, like Civic, okay, one of the things, you can like scan in your invoices, you can scan in your checks.
Right.
And then they're all like linked together.
Yeah.
When are you ever going to, utilize that? It's more work by scanning all of that stuff in, than.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a
Do
motion. Do you have any other
She's got a
questions?
motion, then I can discuss our
Yeah.
thoughts. so.
I make a motion to accept Workhorse and to approve the funds, move this up to council to approve the funds for Joanne to approve. to purchase this.
What's that
Well,
one?
And the sum of
$30,200 with an annual support fee of $6,500.
Okay.
When do you have?
Now I have a question. So I love this idea. I thought in our budget last year, we allocated funds to pay for software.
50,000 in the CIP.
Correct.
It was in the CIP.
CIP.
What was it included in the budget?
Was it?
I did not see that. I got a copy of the
I don't see
budget
it. I don't,
and I was looking.
I don't
Right.
see
I don't
it.
think it's there.
It was
Okay.
just identified.
Right. I had a copy of the budget and I didn't see it. And I was looking.
So goes,
Where do you want those funds to come from?
Yeah.
I would suggest,
Lighthouse.
This is, yeah, right.
Yeah, are becoming.
I would recommend taking it out of the ARP funds. In essence, it's a one-time deal, but it's gonna have a long-term impact. And that's what those ARP funds were designed to do, rather than taking out of the general fund.
I'm just asking Steve, you want to take it from the ARPA funds. When you typically purchase this, you make other funds pay their share, like we're buying the utility module. So utility, water, sewer would pay a portion of that. So you're suggesting that we don't spread that cost across the funds. We're just going to take it all from ARPA.
Correct. And any annual software costs would then be allocated to the funds that use it.
Correct.
Do you want to include that into the?
Wendy, did you have a question? Okay.
I don't think it needs to be.
Do you need to amend the motion?
No, because that's just, that'll be.
Well, my motion stands.
Yes.
We have a motion.
We had a second.
We had a second.
Now we need a roll.
We don't.
Okay.
We don't
See the
need
roll
a-
call, please?
Thank
It's
you.
money.
Eric Wisnicky.
Aye.
Kathy Brown.
Aye.
John Blaha.
Yep.
James Brewster is absent. Wendy Shelton.
Aye.
Janita Zimmerman. Aye. Robin Nelson.
Aye.
Richard Taylor.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Moving on. Number G, letter G, consider and recommendation of consulting services, Wisconsin Capital Solutions LLC.
All right, so as you're all aware of, we have conditional issues at the city marina. And at one of the meetings, I had spoken with Jim Loretti from Cedar Corps. And I said that we need to make sure that whatever we're doing, we're making sure that our marina is not going to be closed going forward. We need to look at the short term, keeping it open and safe, and we need to look at the long term and doing real repairs and improvements. And so he had reached out to Arrowhead, I believe was the former name of this company, and now they're called what are they here? Wisconsin Consulting Services. So it consists of Scott Meyer and Tom Fonfera. These individuals were hired by the city back when we were going for the seawall grant. And if you remember, that totaled $4.2 million. And that was a huge win for the city of Kewaunee, and something that was in such disrepair and unsafe. It was all but dilapidated. So that whole project and improvements to the lighthouse was all completed. And when looking at possibilities for grants or any other money opportunities out there, it seemed only logical to go back to these individuals and for them to work with Cedar Corporation and Edgewater to try to maximize any funding resources that are available. These guys are in Madison all the time. They work with all the legislatures. If there is money out there for our project, they'll find it. And it's not guaranteed that they're going to get us money, but if it's there, they're going to find it. It's one of those deals that certain things we just can't do on our own, and we need to hire the professionals to do it. That's why we have an accounting firm. That's why we have the engineering firm. And that's why you source these professionals. So after having a conversation with Scott Meyer and Tom Fonfera, they felt positive that they could go to work and get something done for the city. And they look forward to doing that. So they put a contract together, which you see is in your packet. It was originally dated to begin June 1st. Obviously, we're past June, so this would be a July agreement. They put a 6-month agreement together. That's $4,000 a month. Now, having said that, Scott is very confident that either the first month or possibly 2 months, he'll know if there's money out there. He'll know it's either there or it's not. He's not going to just keep us on the string for 6 months or anything like that. He's going to find out what's out there, working with the, again, Cedar Corporation, Edgewater. And, the other thing that we need to identify exactly what we want to do. That's part of it as well. We need to identify exactly what it is that we're trying to do down there. Are we trying to do status quo? There's been conversations Augie's had with other people too, and with Cedar Corps, doing some changes down there, both for different functions and for protection. I think the biggest thing down there is that current system has been servicing the city well when it's been maintained. And we've had some different maintenance done by different companies that have come in and done work for us. We used to pull docks out, do annual work on the docks. We haven't done some of that for different reasons. Personnel change, contractor changes. So if we can get an SOP together and find out what we should be doing down there and stick to it, that's another part of it. But I strongly recommend that the COW recommends to the council to contract these services.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just point out that maybe this $4,000 a month we're currently paying Bauman, and it expires in July. Maybe we could give the city a little time to find out exactly what it is we want to do. And maybe start with this consulting firm the 1st of August. And that'll give the city a little bit of time to try to find out where we want to go with it So they know what they can apply for and
So-
tell us about.
That's possible. The other thing is obviously the Marina Fund has monies in it that is most appropriate for something marina related. And I don't want to make it sound like time is of the essence. Time is of the essence, both for our needs and for what's available on the monies. The money situation is going to be drying up on the availability of funds. The conference call we had, just to give you a bigger picture, if we were to decide we're going to spend, I'm just going to throw a number out there, $2 million for a new marina. It's going to be what, spring of 24, the earliest we could see new docks if we pulled the trigger right now.
Correct.
So that's another situation we're up against. Is that timeline, we're up against any grant or other creative resources for funding? You know, you're right for certain things on that, Rich. I just caution us on every day that goes by is a year that's gone by on that marina and addressing the
Is there a
situation.
reason you think that we would need to extend this past the first of the year? Could we just authorize this to like December 31st? Do you think we'll need to go farther than that with this firm?
I'm not saying how much we would or wouldn't. I can just tell you that if the money is available in one stream or another, Scott pretty much assured me he would know within 2 months. And then it would be a matter of going forward and working. There's a
Well,
lot
we'll
of
be
work
working
that
on the
goes into
budget
this.
here pretty soon.
Yeah, exactly,
We're gonna
right.
get right into it.
Right.
Very soon.
Steve, just to clarify on the dollar amount for this agreement, let's just say we did full term, 6-month contract. The money is in the Marina Fund
Yes, sir.
and the money is appropriate for this type of an agreement.
We have 285,000. We did take some dollars out of that, the dockage.
As of 31 December 2021, that number is accurate.
Correct, sir. Yes.
And that was confirmed by the auditors.
Yep.
Just so we're aware of that.
And I just have to agree with Jeff that we don't want to drag our feet on looking for money because there's a lot of other municipalities looking. So if we can jump that gun before it happens.
Wendy?
And we have this charrette that's happening in the middle of July, and that should give us some indication. I think we could have a pretty reasonable plan of what we wanted to do after that. And Edgewater can work their magic and give us a proposal, but they can get going and start looking for the money.
I mean, I think we made it pretty clear in our conference call with them. They understand where we're at and they've been working quite well with us.
Yeah, I'm sure they've got a pretty good idea of what they're looking at already.
Yeah.
So.
This work effort could go parallel with the charrette and the work effort that's going on at the marina and the harbor by Edgewater and Cedar Corporation. And ultimately, at the end, they could be complementary in nature.
I mean, we've identified the problem for years and the problem that we're facing is only becoming larger.
Yeah.
So adding this outfit to the team that we've already got assembled, I just think is going to give us the best chances that we can to help us fund it.
Any other questions?
So I guess my thing is, okay, so what you're saying is it better to wait maybe or to move on this right now? I guess is that.
So to answer that, I think what Rich is bringing up is important. There is going to be some money that's freed up that's been dedicated to other things. Part of that money, it can go wherever, we see fit, but I think it needs to also be incorporated into administration. We need to get, more help in going in the office and making sure that things are staying on track. There's a lot of things being tasked to Joanne right now. Moving forward, this new software, the software is going to be coming in ready to go showtime 1 January, but it's going to be a lot of uploading and all of these other things that need to be done prior to that. So that's another thing, another conversation. But to answer your question, to wait, I don't think waiting.
Okay, so you need a motion?
Hold on, Augie has a question.
Even if there is money available, you might not even see that grant money. Even if we can get some, you might not even see that money until January.
Depends on the budget cycle and where it's coming from.
Right, right,
Their budget.
right,
And
correct.
basically what Steve's saying is this is coming out of the Marina Fund?
Correct.
If that-
So-
If that's where you want it from.
Yeah, that's where you want to come.
But it's, so it
That
is,
makes sense.
it is the money available. I mean, it's not like
Yeah.
we're trying to. So.
I propose it to come from the Marina Fund because it's most appropriate that that's what it's
Yeah.
serving.
Yeah, but I'm just saying then, when he was talking about that money was freeing up,
Sure.
that's coming from a different account.
Correct,
So
yes.
that's what I was trying to clarify. Okay, well, do you need a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to move this up to council to um, engage this company.
I'll second.
We have to put any dollar amounts on that or?
Well, the contract that's proposed, but it would be effective 1 July, not June. And because it says 1
The letter
June, I
was
told him
June.
verbally and he's like, yeah, go ahead and change that when you send it or whatever.
Do we need to add that in the motion?
Sure.
So I'm in my motion to say that the first day of July change on the agreement.
You want the term to change also from November 30th to December 31st?
Yes. And obviously there's exit clauses in the agreement that we can terminate the contract sooner.
Was there a second?
Second. Yeah.
Roll call, please.
Eric Wiznicki,
Aye.
Kathy Brown. John Blaha.
Aye.
James Brewster is absent. Wendy Shelton.
Aye.
Janita Zimmerman.
Aye.
Robin Nelson.
Aye.
Richard Taylor.
Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to H, building permit fees. Clarification of roofing and window permits.
I have to apologize for this one. I think I missed something here, but I just want to correct it as we go forward. In essence, working with Brett Gillette, he had submitted and it was approved his fee schedule. His fee schedule, though, when we had discussions with him, because it's not in state statutes for re-roofing, re-siding, or re-windows without structural alterations, he would address those with structural alterations. However, there are re-roofing and re-windowing and re-siding that go on without structural alterations.
And concrete,
What's that?
and concrete.
And concrete. In essence, what I'm proposing to do is for re-roofing. I'd like a motion to modify the fee structure to include fees of 2%, $60 minimum, $600 maximum for roof siding and window replacement for structurally non-altered work efforts. Modify the fee permits to reflect that.
So this was brought up in a previous meeting, and I personally think these are too high. And if we're amending these, I would like to make I think it would make more sense to have a flat fee for roofing, siding, windows, and concrete.
So I think what Steve's mostly looking for right now is the area of responsibility. And in regards to the fee schedule, again, I think that could be best handled at the finance committee and amended at that time. Because we haven't had a comprehensive look at what the fee should or shouldn't be. I mean, we've had some suggestions, but we haven't had a committee actually look at it.
That's
That's
true.
my
Hold on, I know
recommendation.
John had some.
Waters.
You're gonna put a fee on point of driveway?
What was that?
You're gonna put a fee on to pour a driveway?
There is.
We're not proposing to change anything in the fee
No,
schedule
that's
right
the way
now,
it
it's
is
just the
currently.
jurisdiction, yeah, so.
Yeah, because we had to
Go back
get a
and-
permit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Why do
okay.
you need one?
So
Well,
that's just my opinion. I think we could look at the fee schedule that's within the city's responsibility when we've had a better look at it as a committee.
The concrete placement permit is the same verbiage language to 2%, 60 and 600. If you wanted something in place until the committee had an opportunity to take a look at it, I'd recommend that you approve this. However, if you want to wait on that and send it to committee, that's your prerogative.
I think it should be wait and send to committee. The fee structure, the entire fee
So how are
structure, if
we-
we're gonna look at it, let's do it at the committee level, and that's why we have the committees drafted. I mean, that's why we're going to standing committees now.
So basically, this is what it's at right now.
That-
Yeah.
Well, it is and it isn't, because
I'd say it isn't because it wasn't included in the fee structure that was approved by the council. This was something well, Brett and I've had our discussions. I'll just leave it at that. The way everything was approved, the fees for non-structurally altered, he's got in his language additions, remodeling, alterations. And then he's got the 12 cents per square foot, $75 per minimum. That is different than what we had in our initial fee structure. What I'm proposing is to put the fee structure in place until what was in place previously, until you have a chance to take a look at the fees, the permits, et cetera. That's all I'm saying right now. Because otherwise, I don't know that we have the ability to collect those fees and have it as a result. So if you want to collect them at this particular point in time, I would recommend you do this. However, I understand you want to send it back to committee to take a look at all this.
so right now, it's kind of in limbo and we're not collecting fees.
Correct.
Okay. I would make a motion to move it to keep it as it stands right now. Move it to committees for future scrutiny. Do I even need a motion for that? I don't know.
I don't think you do, because the
Okay.
committees aren't even established yet.
Okay.
There has to be a second reading.
So no action will
So
keep
No
it as
action.
is.
Okay,
When you mean as is, you mean?
with no fees.
But Steve,
Okay,
aren't you talking about two different things? Aren't you also trying to get Mr. Gillett to be the responsible party for issuing and oversight on some of that?
yeah, I.
Correct.
I left him a voicemail message. And I
That's
sent him an email
part of what we're
that-
trying to do here as
that if-
well as the fees.
That if we get these approved, it's my expectation, he's gonna do it. He basically,
He didn't respond to that email.
no.
Yeah,
Did he? I didn't
Yes.
see it.
Yep, he did.
he said, okay.
Yep, he did.
Oh, wow.
He said, okay, about what?
That he'll inspect or not, that he'll issue them or.
Steve, would you just please clarify for the council exactly what it is you're looking to try to do with Mr. Gillett? Just so that they understand, because we're kind of talking two different things here.
Yeah, Mr. Gillett is collecting fees for alterations that have structural modifications for windows, roofing, siding. However, he was not collecting for windows, roofing, or siding that did not have structural modifications. So that's what's out there in limbo. What I would like him to do is to take care of all of that, no matter whether it's structurally altered or not. And that's where I'm at with him. But the one thing that I left out in your approval of the fees and permits was the fees for non-structurally altered roofing, siding.
Okay, well, based on my discussion with Mr. Gillett, he said he doesn't charge for what he doesn't inspect, and he's not required to inspect per state statutes non-structural windows, siding, doors, concrete roofing, all that. So he doesn't do an inspection on that. And he said if the city wants to collect a permit fee, they can do that and not pay him his cut.
The only thing is,
Otherwise, we can keep all the money. We don't have to give Brett anything for it. And he said, maybe Steve could, or somebody at City Hall could issue the permit if they want to keep all the money. Because he's not going to inspect it anyway.
believe me, you do not want me inspecting roofs, siding.
No, he's not going to inspect it.
There are things that are being done out there that, there's one siding down here on Miller Street that the water is gonna come rushing in the J channels, because they didn't do it structurally right. And I talked to a couple people about that. That being said, if we're gonna issue a permit, we need to at least take a ride by and take a look to make sure and that type of thing. And that would be something that Mr. Gillette would be doing.
I was just gonna mention the same thing. Somebody was gonna try putting 3 layers of roofing on, you know? Why not? You can get away with it.
And, you know, some of this stuff also goes in a building permit, it goes to the assessor. You know, so that keeps track of improvements. You put new siding on. There'll very likely be an adjustment. You put in new windows, especially more expensive windows, you don't structurally alter it. That's an added value as well. So I think keeping it in one area with Brett, even though we get 10% and he gets 90%, I think it's good for the community.
But we're not here to.
I think that's a great point, but if our community is making the improvements and they're just wanting the permit, I guarantee you, I've gotten permits and there's no one that's come out to see how many layers of roofing I had put on my house or what windows I had installed. I paid the permit fee and so on. I think homeowners should have the responsibility as what they're putting on their own home, number one. But my thing is, if we're putting the improvements out there, I think a flat fee is reasonable to say that also is accountability. You have that to say, okay, they put this on. So again, that could go to your taxes for assessment. So you still have that accountability of what they did, but adding 2% by square footage to this and that to be put, I mean, I just think we're getting carried away on when somebody's doing upgrades to their homes.
Are they doing
That's my opinion.
upgrades or are they doing maintenance? They're, you know, that's the
Per the
thing.
state, it's maintenance.
Yeah,
Right. I mean, I just think a flat fee and let's not get carried away with what we want to
That's your call.
take. And I'm just throwing that out. That's
Yeah,
my
yeah,
opinion.
that's your
The
call.
point is you wanted that to go to the committee. You just, for right now, you just want to get this dealt with. So is that what I was understanding? Or
Yeah, that's where I was coming from.
Just-
But
just to-
It, you know, you can leave it alone, or you can modify it to collect the fees until the committee takes a look at it, whichever way.
Why don't we
There are
just
many
do it?
other battles.
Why don't we do it? Why
For
don't
me
we
to-
just make it simple and do what Steve's recommending right now? And then leave the rest of it. And that's why we drafted these committees and moved that to the committee. It's only a month or so and then they can deal with that at that time. But at least we get taken care of what Steve is recommending now.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to do that.
I'll second that.
Second.
who's second?
Does that include concrete work then too?
Well, I guess whatever you recommend.
You mentioned it once.
Concrete.
Concrete is what Brett
Concrete,
mentioned.
siding, windows, doors.
Well, for now, anyway, and then. Yeah.
Is pouring
Is that a roll call or is
concrete.
that
They
a
need
vote?
to.
It's a voice vote.
All those in favor?
I,
Opposed?
who said name?
Motion carried.
I don't agree.
Wendy.
Motion carried. Moving on to I, consider and recommendations to request to close Ellis Street and extension of premises boundaries for alcohol license for the Chad Guns Banquet August 6th, 2022. I guess I have to put that on there because I received an email. Casey, you want to come up and talk about it a little bit?
We are.
You just have to talk to the green light.
Oh, okay.
Do we need to push it further? No.
Permission to close really essentially from 207 Ellis, Roosters and Blue Door east to the stop sign. The reason being is we're having a very large benefit and we're expecting a large amount of people to attend. Of all ages for most of the day. And people will be going back and forth. We'll have a milk bottle tournament. There's auctions, silent auctions, bucket raffles. So we're anticipating people to be moving back and forth quite a bit that day. And just for safety reasons, we do also plan on getting some tents, larger tents for the milk bottle tournament and areas for people to eat, and we're having some food vendors and like I said, raffles. So just really essentially for safety reasons so that people can safely cross between the two buildings for the benefit that we're holding that day. Yeah, 203.
Where is that?
207.
So where is that?
That's Roosters.
Okay.
So right, Roosters and the Blue Door right across from each other, east to the stop sign.
And why
Just
did
that
you just pick
section.
that section?
Because in talking to Chief Kleiman, he didn't think that we could close the whole street, so we just said, well, could we just do that little portion of the street? For back and forth.
Well, I'm totally in agreement with it's gonna be a big crowd. I have concerns about that myself. I think it's one of the biggest things moving here in this community is the community involvement and the support that the community does for things like this. It's amazing. And I think this is critical for us to continue it as a community. We shouldn't change. But I think that more of the street should be closed off for, we've had people go through the road when we had part of the car show there before. As an EMT and fire, I would rather say we have 2 sections to go in and not have people. My concern would be, how do you get out of there once you come in? Do you have to flip a U-ey when 2 cars are? I mean, to me, that's more of a liability than shutting the roads and us having access other ways. But I do agree with you, and I
It
would
is
vote
pretty
to.
close for the car show. Coming
Well,
up
I
soon,
agree.
You know,
I
that
agree.
whole street is gonna be closed.
And I have talked to some of the other businesses in the area, and they were not opposed in any way. Matter of fact,
There
for it.
is a wedding at Lake Haven Hall that weekend also, so that is something to consider as well.
So they would still be able to go past
Oh,
like the post
absolutely.
office
Yep.
or Volrath to get there though?
Yes, yes.
And what is your time frame?
Really, it would be, we can have the tent taken down by 9 PM. I mean,
Is that really
we start at
feasible?
10 AM. We start at 10 AM. And the milk bottle tournament starts at 11 AM. So
So, yeah, I spoke with Chief Kleiman about this, and it's been closed in the past for like Trout Festival, years ago. It's been closed for the car show. And that was the whole street, and it was also then done in the afternoon.
right.
Yeah, the idea of a benefit in itself is all fantastic. Kathy said a lot of things that I totally agree with, the community coming together for those sorts of things. But there were, the issues that Chief Kleiman had that he'd expressed to you, and, that's why it's like, yeah, you're here to speak to the
Yes.
council, which is,
And we have alternate
Appreciate it.
plans, just so we do have alternate plans, so
Right.
it doesn't go through.
it's
We
obviously
respect
the
any
easiest
decision
thing to
that you
do would
guys
be to
make.
close the street, but,
Yes.
there are the areas around there and the other backup plans that you guys have to have a great successful event. So I would just urge the council to strongly consider the chief's position, so.
Go ahead.
Before a motion would get made, there's also concerns about alcohol. that
Liquor licenses.
Liquor licenses, you would have to amend boundaries. The Department of Revenue had suggested that, barricades get put up, that we make a definitive line as to where one's boundary ends and the other one begin, where they end, put a line there, to make it easier for us to be able to amend that boundary. Hard alcohol, is not allowed outside of the facilities or the establishments, but, fermented malt beverages are allowed to be, walked out of and out onto the street, consumed.
Well, our ordinance doesn't allow that.
Well, and that's the other thing I was gonna say, is that you have to then amend your ordinance for this in order to allow that.
With the alternate spaces, how is the alcohol to be addressed there?
Well, it would be in the beer garden at the Blue Door. Is where we would.
Got a question?
No, I
Oh,
was scratch my
we'll take a
head.
question on this side.
Yeah, so,
So, during the car show, when the entire block is cordoned off, the bowling alley and Blue Door and Roosters, or used to be Gooses, did they sell alcohol and people wandered about looking at cars with a beer or whatever?
there was more than
Is
likely
that-
some
yeah,
beers carried around in the street
I'm
without a
thinking
doubt.
that probably
And Trout
happened.
Fest, typically it was supposed to be dropped at the gate when you left the beer garden at
Yeah,
Trout
yeah,
Fest. There was
yeah,
a
I remember
garbage
that.
can.
Yeah.
Um,
So when I read Chief Clammond's response, it really seemed like the only way it made sense was to do the entire block or don't do it. And it does seem the safest alternative. I don't know. Joanne probably brought up some pretty good issues there.
I guess my concern would be too, is the other businesses, and Kathy said she talked to the other businesses, might, if they had a problem, I'd have a problem with it,
I
but.
didn't talk to everyone, but
Yeah.
the ones that I knew would
Well,
be
most of them
greatly.
are closed. I
Yeah.
think like the veterinarian office is closed. The history center would be open, but I don't think that would be a big issue. Yeah, but I don't think that'd be an issue for them.
So this is a one and done.
It's a
This
one
is
and done,
not
just a
going
one
to be
day.
a yearly
No,
event.
this is a one-time thing. He's,
So-
yeah, it's
I
because of his surgery.
actually have a little bit of input on this. I think it's great that Casey and Jason and the girls from the Blue Door are investing in businesses downtown. And I think it's our responsibility to help them grow our downtown area. Now, this event in particular is bringing, like you said, outside people from outside Kewaunee. I mean, I think Guns are from Sparta. I mean, this is a lot of people that graduated from Kewaunee will be coming back to support this, and a lot of people from their new hometown, the Gunses, are gonna be coming here. This is marketing gold. This is a great story. Everything is good about this. And I'm trying to find a way to make this work. And I think as a community, this is just my opinion. I haven't talked to anybody about this. We got to find a way to start building more of our downtown area, not just Lake Haven Hall. And the only thing I could find that was comparable was what Green Bay does with Farmers Market on Wednesdays. If they can close down a couple blocks of Broadway, I think little Kewaunee can close down, like you said, the whole street from the bank to the end of the Roosters there. How we do this, I think we got to make it beneficial for the whole community. Like you said, if you got food vendors we can put in there and maybe some arts or maybe, farmers market included. But I think the hours, realistically, I don't think we can go to 9 o'clock. I mean, I think, if there's a wedding at 6 o'clock or whatever it is, I think realistically, this has got to be done in the street at a respectable hour for the community.
Eric, maybe just got one question.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it either. I really don't. I do have one concern though, and that's what type of a benefit would we turn down if, say, for instance, Roosters wanted to do it for someone or the Blue Door wanted to do it for another event?
I thought about
That's the
that.
only thing that, it's the only thing that concerns me.
I-
So they would come to the council, and you understand what I mean? So somebody gets hurt.
Happens to be that he's a very dear friend of ours and
Right.
that's,
I mean, somebody gets
and
hurt
it's
in
a
a car
very
accident and they're in the
unlikely-
hospital. So they want to do a benefit and close the street down. I mean, would we do that? That's where what I'm wondering is where would we draw the line then as to say, no, your benefit was a great thing, but this benefit, we're gonna close it.
completely.
That's the only thing I'm asking.
An idea I came up with, like I said, on my own, I'm just spitballing here, is I'd like to see more of this being done downtown Kewaunee. And in summer months in particular, June, July, and August, maybe one Saturday a month for June, July, and August. And this is an idea. June, we have the car show. We just make it legit. I mean, this is what we're doing. July would be Alumni Fest. In August, when the benefit is, would be like an open date for something like this. And I don't know particulars, like I said, I'm just spitballing. But this would be like a pilot or a test program to see if Kewaunee can do something like this, how it goes. Yeah, and if it's something that could work, that's good for Kewaunee, good to bring more people downtown Kewaunee, then we move forward and we come up with a more permanent solution. But we don't know until we try.
That timeframe, like you said, farmer's market is a certain timeframe.
Right.
That that's blocked off, I realize this is a very long time frame. So we completely
It's a one and
understand
done.
it.
Does anybody know if there's a permit required to be issued, a fee that's charged, any charge for overtime for the police department for this event? Does anybody know about any other financials for the
This is uncharted
city?
territory.
No,
And how Green Bay does it is I think they have on Broadway kind of running it and they have insurance requirements. I mean, yeah.
personal or business.
I think you should try it once and just see how it and see what happens.
The
you know.
points that Joanne has brought up are very legitimate, though, about barricades and about hard alcohol.
Right.
And that type of thing, and they have to be adhered to, because if something happens there and they're not being adhered to, there's significant liability, not only to the businesses, but also to the city of Kewaunee. So as long as those are adhered to and followed, everyone's on the same safe ground. But if there's any deviation and an issue that comes up, you just have to be a little on the careful side. That's all I'm saying.
Would we make a request to Chief Kleiman to assign an officer on overtime or something to cover this, or what? How would you enforce that otherwise?
You'd have to ask the chief what his recommendation would be. His recommendation was to not do it.
Right.
Just saying.
Not to quote, his recommendation was, he said we could come to the council and just.
Yeah.
The Department of Revenue, the Department of Revenue said that you could require them to hire their own security. To, you know, to oversee
Like
the alcohol.
somebody at the door to make sure they're not walking out with shots of
Making sure,
liquor.
making sure that,
or-
you know, children are, you know, getting served alcohol around, you know, out in the,
Okay.
or underage, I should say.
What's the date on this again? August 6th, so it has to go to the council on
July 11th.
July
July
11th.
11th, and by July 11th, hopefully we'll talk to the chief, come up with all the do's and don'ts and requirements. Joy, you think we can get all of this put together in time?
I'm thinking for you, you need to know too, because, right, you're making plans.
Well,
of-
I mean, we're renting tents either way. It just depends where.
Oh, where are you gonna put them? Gotcha, gotcha.
I make a motion that we move this to the council meeting on July 11th for further consideration.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
I-
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just let me know if there's anything.
I think we need help putting this idea together for Jim. So we'll be helping asking for help.
The rest of the group owes me.
Yeah, they do. Free labor.
So now you're gonna need a motion and you're gonna read that. So
He
you-
needs- Well, he needs to
Oh, we
read
gotta
it.
finish
He needs-
that.
He needs to read it.
Next, moving on, we have to consider the act to enter closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85. 1C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the government body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. City administrator, interim administrator, public works, wastewater operating in charge, evaluation and reorganization.
I'll make a motion to move to closed session.
Roll call, please.
Thanks, Brandon.
Eric Woznicki,
Yes.
Kathy Brown. Yes. John Blaha,
Nice.
James Brewster's absent, Wendy Shelton. Hi. Janita Zimmerman.
I,
Robin Nelson. Hi. Richard Taylor.
Aye.
can we have a?
Recess.
Yes.
Easy break, recording.
I guess.
Time for a pee break.
Thank you, everyone. I think that was a good discussion about possibly helping the city.
Well, I mean, and that's kind of how Jim Kleiman put it. It's like, well, you either do the whole block or you don't do it. And I understand his point.
No.
But I think this is just,
You
I mean,
guys-
like I said, if it doesn't work
I'm
out,
not done yet. I'm trying to figure out how to.
Just saying.
So, yeah, all right.
Where did it go?
Yeah. yeah.
Oh.
Whatever.
That's exactly what it is.
The official communication of the city is not supposed to be Facebook.
Let me make a copy of this. I'll send it.
You can have it.
Okay, I'm gonna send it to Justin. I'll scan it and send it to him. So that he better understands what transpired.
That's, I mean, for what it's worth, that's.
Yeah.
my dad can look up something, you love that.
How are you doing?
A long day.
When did you get here today?
9 hours.
The other answer would be, talk to IT about it.
Tired.
John, the other reply would be, talk to IT about it.
Last week I had a nail in my tire. was from the, it was from this, the dam on Mill, on, Highway 29. It's not there. There was a nail.
I'll just keep
The guy told me, he said, "You should really bring this to the historical museum, because it was just the weirdest looking nail.
There's supposed to be a button.
And then I was coming down the road on 29 and I had a crew concrete truck throw a rock.
And that's where I can
I went
like
to-
disconnect.
Oh, yeah, it was a, and it was just, it was a rifle shot.
You're close.
It made a big difference like this. I'm
David,
like, I gotta
Vanessa.
bring it to Safe Light tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah.
They can do some really good things with that. But it was like, you know,
It's a long day.
yeah, well, yeah.
That's the Zoom. This is when you're on YouTube. Well, if it shows up, it just kill it, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah.
One is watching, control up, delete, end all tasks. Just go by.
I don't get this.
Do control alt delete, end task.
Check was a big one in the area.
You're sure that it's.
And they sold out, but then.
Oh my God.
the report you got-
Okay, see, now here.